Chapter 155. The grass was green, and sometimes there were flowers. Amidst the chaos of bees and butterflies, the sound of the zither strings was clear and long, slowly drifting to the surface of the water. It was really eye-catching for such a person to play the zither in such a chaotic situation. The white-clothed swordsman sat quietly. As his slender hands stroked the strings, the sound of the zither flowed out. It was still the song's slow time. In fact, he could play many songs, but over the years, he had played this song the most. He had set up a formation around him, and the sound of the zither also had the ability to confuse people. When Yudo arrived here, he would be confused by the formation, and it would be difficult for him to find the entrance. He could stall for more time for Chui Yueji and wait for the late arrival of the east wind from God. Yudo's ship was slowly approaching, and someone got off the ship aggressively. Lu Buwang sat quietly, as if he was meditating on Qian Mountain back then. He was calm and unhurried. Taoist Yunji didn't praise him, but he had always been very tolerant of him. Everyone always said that he was the best among the 7 senior brothers on the mountain back then. His senior brothers always laughed and joked that he would bring glory to the sect one day. But he had been expelled from the sect long ago. The sound of the zither paused, as if disturbed by a foreign object, and he played the wrong rhythm. Lu Buwang was slightly absent-minded. Back then, he met Mu Hongjin at the foot of Qiyun Mountain. Later, he learned that Mu Hongjin was the beloved daughter of King Mengji in Jiang City. Mu Hongjin didn't want to marry the son of an important official in the court, so she begged Lu Buwang to take her away. Lu Buwang hesitated for a long time and decided to let her wait in the inn. He returned to Qiyun Mountain with his junior sister first and reported this matter to Taoist Yunji. But once he went up the mountain, he couldn't come down again. It was already a year later when he went down the mountain. Mu Hongjin always thought that he lied to her and deliberately told King Mengji about her whereabouts. He was the one who sent Mu Hongjin back to King Mengji's mansion. In fact, that wasn't the case. Back then, Lu Buwang did go up the mountain in a hurry. When he went up the mountain, he told Taoist Yunji that a girl who ran away from her marriage was forced by her family and was now resting outside. He hoped that Taoist Yunji could find a way to let him take Mu Hongjin up the mountain. Lu Buwang was honest and kind by nature. For the first time, he lied to Taoist Yunji. He only said that Mu Hongjin was a girl from an ordinary family, and did not mention that she was the daughter of Prince Mengji. Lu Buwang was worried. Once Taoist Yunji knew Mu Hongjin's true identity, he might not save her. However, Taoist Master Yunji knew better than him. "Are you talking about Mu Hongjin from Prince Meng's mansion?" Lu Buwang was stunned. "Master, you're so stupid." Taoist Master Yunji looked at him and scolded him with a sullen face. "Do you know who she is? She was the only daughter of King Mengji and would inherit the throne in the future. The reason why King Mengji arranged this marriage for her is because she will become King Mengji's daughter. You were so careless as to bring her up Qiyun Mountain. Do you know what kind of disaster you will bring to Jiang City? How much trouble would it bring to Qiyun Mountain? Even if you don't care about the lives of the people in Jiang City, your senior martial brothers grew up with you. Don't tell me you don't care about their safety?" "Master, it's not like that," Lu Buwang argued. Taoist Yunji sighed and said, "Do you think King Mengji will let go of Qiyun Mountain if he knows that you hid his daughter here? He won't know." "Buwang, you're too naive." Taoist Yunji flicked his sleeves and said, "Give up. I won't do anything." Lu Buwang knelt on the ground. After thinking for a while, he stood up and bowed to Taoist Yunji. "I understand. What do you want to do? I'll think of a way myself." Lu Buwang thought that although he was not as capable as Taoist Yunji, there was always a way out. He must be able to think of another way. The most important thing now was that he had to go down the mountain first. The day he agreed to meet Mu Hongjin was approaching. "Are you still going to find that woman?" Lu Buwang said, "Yes. I've already made an agreement with her." Taoist Yunji said, "You can't go down the mountain." "What? I can't watch you destroy Qiyun Mountain," Taoist Yunji said. "You must stay on the mountain." "Master, she's still waiting for me." Taoist Yunji's face was completely ruthless. Lu Buwang slowly pulled out the long sword at his waist. He didn't want to fight with his master, but he was really anxious. However, his swordsmanship was not as good as Taoist Yunji's, so he was defeated in the end. Taoist Yunji locked him in a water cave on the mountain. The cave was surrounded by waterfalls and fragrant orchids. Just looking at it, the scenery was very beautiful. But Taoist Yunji had also set up a formation around him, so he couldn't leave the formation and could only be trapped here. Lu Buwang's Chiman Duanjia couldn't be compared with Taoist Yunji's after all. He begged Taoist Yunji in despair. Master, I just need to go down the mountain and say something to her. I can't go back on my words. She's still waiting for me. Master, if you can solve my formation, you can go down the mountain. Taoist Yunji turned and left. Lu Buwang was meditating in the formation and trying to solve it. But this formation was even more powerful than all the formations he had encountered in the past. He was anxious and kept solving the formation day and night. Finally, he fell ill and lost his energy. Yushu came to see him and gave him medicine. Seeing Lu Buwang covered in wounds, she was very distressed and said softly, "Senior martial brother, why are you doing this? Can you beg Master to let me out?" Lu Buwang leaned against the stone wall of the cave and was dying, but his tone was still stubborn. "I want to go down the mountain." Yushu took a step back and couldn't help crying and shouting at him. "So, what if you go down the mountain? She's already married. She didn't wait for you. Mu Hongjin has already married her husband." Lu Buwang widened his eyes slightly. He was in the mountain and in the formation, so he couldn't sense the changes in time outside. He could only count the days. Every other day, he would carve a stroke on the stone wall. Looking back, more than 200 days and nights had passed. That girl, who was wearing a red dress with bells on her long braids and always stuck to him with a smile, was already married? What kind of mood did she have? Was it the hatred of not waiting for him and being stood up? Or was it the despair of being forced to get into the bridal sedan? Lu Buwang's heart ached violently. She didn't wait for you. She has already forgotten your agreement. His junior martial sister stood in front of him and said with tears in her eyes, "So, you should also forget her." Forget her? How is that possible? He didn't know when he was in love with her, but he only knew when she left. He had long been used to the days of being relied on, pestered, and deceived. Even though he was angry, he enjoyed it. How could he forget her so easily? When was she found by the people of the mansion? And when did she get married? He asked slowly. Yushu answered, "Not long after you left, she was found by the soldiers. She got married not long after." Senior martial brother. She still wanted to persuade him. "Why don't you go and admit defeat to Master and live a good life on Chiyun Mountain in the future? Don't mention that matter again, okay?" Lu Buwang didn't speak. Senior martial brother? He raised his head. The young man's eyes, which had always been clean and clear like the warm sun in spring, were now a little cold and distant. Yushu was also frightened by his eyes. "You can go." Lu Buwang said, "Don't come back in the future." He worked harder to solve the formation and studied it. He ignored whether his body could bear it or not, and there was only one thought in his mind. He wanted to go down the mountain. Lu Buwang's Chiman Duanjia advanced by leaps and bounds in this day of hard work. At the same time, he also noticed that the power of Taoist Yunji's formation was gradually weakening. Another spring day came, and he broke out of the formation. The spring rain wet the green grass under the eaves, and the young man's white clothes were splashed with mud. He was completely undecided, and he walked firmly step by step. The senior martial brothers and junior martial sisters surrounded Taoist Yunji's bed. After such a long time, the formation was getting weaker and weaker. It wasn't his illusion that Taoist Yunji's time was coming. Lu Buwang was stunned. He rushed to Taoist Yunji's bed and knelt down. Taoist Yunji looked at him and asked, "Have you broken the formation?" Lu Buwang nodded. His master reached out and touched his pulse slightly. He sensed something and sighed deeply. "You still want to go down the mountain?" he asked. Lu Buwang knelt upright and said, "Yes." There was a long silence. "You can go." The master who raised him said word by word, "From now on, you're no longer a member of my sect. Don't go up Chiyun Mountain again." "Master." The senior martial brothers were shocked and pleaded for him. Taoist Yunji didn't speak. He closed his eyes and when he looked again, he had already passed away. In a single night, he had lost the master who had raised him and the right to stay on Chiyun Mountain. After burying Taoist Yunji with the senior martial brothers, Lu Buong went down the mountain alone. After this farewell, he knew that it would be forever and never be able to meet again. His wound hurt faintly. Breaking the formation by force like this had hurt his foundation after all. It was raining heavily. Without an umbrella, he stumbled on the muddy mountain road without stopping all the way. Finally, he reached the foot of the mountain and entered Jiang City. The city was as lively and warm as that spring day. There was no difference at all. Lu Buong walked to Prince Mingji's mansion. He hid under the eaves opposite the mansion, wearing a bamboo hat, and wanted to see Mu Hongjin. He didn't know what to say when he saw Mu Hongjin. He was the one who failed to keep the appointment, and he was also the one who was late for more than a year. He was the one who asked her to wait for him, and he was also the one who didn't come. But if she wanted to leave and shook his arm like back then, asking him to take her away, Lu Buong thought that he might still be helpless and do as she wished. Then he saw Mu Hongjin. Unlike the arrogant girl back then, she had become more beautiful. Wearing an exquisite and luxurious robe, she got out of the carriage and said something to the man beside her. The man beside her also looked gentle. He hugged her waist from behind, and his robe couldn't cover her slightly bulging belly. Mu Hongjin was pregnant. The legendary bad old man was not old, and his gaze was very gentle when he looked at her. She looked back at him with a gentle gaze, completely different from the arrogant and willful girl in his memory. The rain wet his boots and robe, but Lu Buong felt that it was not as embarrassing as him at this moment. They were in harmony with each other, and they were a loving couple. They looked like an immortal couple while he stood here looking out of place. But why should he make Mu Hongjin wait here all the time? This girl was as bright and lively as the peach blossoms at the foot of Chiyun Mountain. Beautiful people or things were always discovered by others. Just as he fell in love with her unknowingly, Mu Hongjin's husband was the same. Mu Hongjin already had her own peaceful life, so there was no need for him to disturb her. As if his gaze was too hot and painful, Mu Hongjin seemed to feel it and looked back. Lu Buong turned slightly and hid under the shadow of the eaves. "What's wrong?" The man beside her held her hand and asked. "Nothing." Mu Hongjin shook her head. "It's probably my illusion." The rain was cold. He was obviously hiding under the eaves, so why did it wet his cheeks? He seemed to taste bitterness at the corner of his lips. It turned out that the spring rain was also not sweet. He strode away. The sound of the zither was poetic and picturesque, covering all the murderous intent in the jungle. Some Yudo stepped in without noticing and suddenly screamed. For a moment, there were screams. Finally, someone realized that something was wrong and stopped the people behind him. "Don't come in. There's an ambush." Lu Buong smiled slightly. After leaving the mountain that year, he had been silent for a long time, like a walking corpse, not knowing what he could do in the future. He could neither return to Chiyun Mountain nor find Mu Hongjin. For a time, he felt that living in the world was meaningless, until Yushu found him. His little junior sister was not as cute as before, and she was much more haggard. Standing in front of him, Lu Buong suddenly realized that Yushu was also a big girl, no longer the little sister who ran around behind him. "Senior martial brother." The girl looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry." "What?" He didn't understand. "The reason why Miss Mu was found by the soldiers of the prince's mansion was that I told on her." Lu Buong's expression froze on the spot. "I like you very much. I don't want you to be with her." Yet, Yushu seemed to want to speak out all her faults in one go, as if she was seeking release. "I eavesdropped on your conversation, so I told Mingji Wang her hiding place. I thought that as long as she got married, you would forget her and stop thinking about her. I didn't expect you to be so stubborn for so many years." "I'm sorry, I was wrong." She burst into tears. "I hurt you, senior martial brother. I'm sorry." She cried to her heart's content, but Lu Buong was like a stone, his whole body stiff and cold. He was young and ignorant, and his mind was rough. He didn't see the deep affection in his little junior sister's eyes when she looked at him, nor did he see the hostility that flashed by when Yushu looked at Mu Hongjin. A girl's love and hate came directly and simply. She only cared about venting when she was angry, but she didn't expect that she would miss a pair of lovers. It wasn't until the world changed and the regret snowballed that she realized her mistake. How could you do this? For the first time, he got angry at Yushu. Did you know? He didn't continue. What did he know? Back then, he didn't know that he loved her so deeply. He was like a fool. Eldest martial brother, who came after hearing the news, found him and said, "Little Seven, don't blame Yushu. She was young and ignorant, and now she knows that she was wrong. Also, don't blame Master for not saving you and locking you in the formation on Qian Mountain." Lu Buwang replied blankly, "I didn't blame anyone. He only blamed himself. Do you know why Master locked you in Qian Mountain back then?" Eldest martial brother said, "Master has always been kind and generous, since he adopted us 7 orphans. So what if Mu Hongjin is the princess? If Master really wanted to protect her, why would he be afraid of the danger brought by this identity?" Lu Buwang looked at him, not understanding what he meant. "Master did it for you." Taoist Yunji once divined for Lu Buwang, and the divination showed that one day he would die young because of a woman. Deep love would kill him. You are Master's favorite disciple. Master was afraid that you would lose your life because of Mu Hongjin, so he locked you in the formation. Eldest martial brother said, "Although he was biased in his actions, he did it wholeheartedly for you." Lu Buwang felt that it was ridiculous. It was just a divination. How could he miss it like this? Taoist Yunji did it for him. So who could he blame? He could only blame the fickleness of the world. He had been staying in Jiang City, hiding in the dark, and doing the same things as before every day. Until one day, Yushu was arrested by Mu Hongjin's guards in the temple. Yushu didn't have the guts to assassinate her. As soon as the news came out, Lu Buwang knew that Mu Hongjin was forcing him to show up. Not only was he not angry, but there was even a trace of joy in his heart. After so many years, he could finally see her in broad daylight. He saw Mu Hongjin in the temple hall in the middle of the night. Time had polished her to be even more magnificent and beautiful. She was like a ripe honey fruit, and her whole body was full of unspeakable flirtatiousness and wildness. Lu Buwang thought bitterly in his heart. Who made her like this? Was it her current husband? Well, they even had a child together. She had already gotten married and had children, and was getting further and further away from him. The woman's red robe was gorgeous, and the golden crown slightly reflected sparkling colors in the night. Her eyes were even brighter than this. She stared at him, and there was no longer the naughtiness and innocence in her eyes from many years ago. He had thousands of words to say to her, but in the end, he didn't know where to start. In the end, the sentence he spat out was, "Where is Yushu?" Lu Buwang still remembered Mu Hongjin's gaze at that time, which seemed to be a little shocked and a little understanding. The moment he said that, he instantly regretted it. He shouldn't have been so blunt. He should have said something else. Asking her how she had been all these years and apologizing for breaking his promise back then was better than questioning her. Mu Hongjin looked at him as if she was looking at a stranger, and she replied lightly, "In prison." The conversation between the two of them was as distant as that between strangers, as if they were standing on opposing sides, and there was no longer the intimacy of the past. Lu Buwang was very conflicted. He wanted to stay here, talk to her more, and look at her more. But he was afraid that if he stayed here for too long, he wouldn't be able to control himself and reveal his feelings, which would cause trouble for Mu Hongjin. It had been a long time, and he didn't arrive in time back then. Now, Mu Hongjin already had someone else by her side, and she no longer needed him. Why should he come to disturb her and ask for a snub? He wanted Mu Hongjin to release Yushu and catch him. Taoist Yunji raised him, and Yushu was his daughter. He couldn't watch Yushu be imprisoned. Besides, Mu Hongjin's purpose of catching Yushu was him. Lu Buwang thought that Mu Hongjin must hate him very much, but people were stingy to show a trace of affection for things they didn't care about, so Mu Hongjin hated him. Perhaps, after so many years, she still had a little bit of love left. She's just a junior sister. You're so protective of her. Do you like her? Lu Buwang answered, yes. What did you say? Lu Buwang looked at her, as if he wanted to engrave her appearance at this moment in his heart forever. He said word by word, I like her. He admitted that he was the one who told on her, that he lied to Mu Hongjin and made up a promise casually, and that he had never liked Mu Hongjin. Mu Hongjin smiled. Her smile was contemptuous and sarcastic, as if his likes and dislikes were so insignificant and ridiculous. She wanted Lu Buwang to be her lover as a condition for letting Yushu go. Lu Buwang was furious. He was furious that she humiliated him and her like this. But in his anger, there was a faint desire. He was horrified to find that he had never given up in his heart. It was as if there were countless fire seeds buried in the ground. As long as she said a word, they could easily break out of the ground and start a prairie fire. He agreed. But Mu Hongjin was unwilling. Mu Hongjin wanted him to get out of Jiang City with Yushu and never set foot here again. She wanted to draw a clean line between herself and Lu Buwang so that they would never cross paths. This was the last time he talked to Mu Hongjin. Lu Buwang later changed his name to Layman Yunlin and traveled around. He went to many places. He was dressed in white, and his swordsmanship was outstanding. Everywhere he went, people praised and admired him. But he was always cold and cheerless, as if he didn't care about anything. He also never saw his own senior brothers and Yushu again. In this world, everyone ultimately had to become their lonesome self. But he still returned to Jiang City every year during the Water God Festival. He secretly entered the city without anyone knowing, just to take a look at the city that Mu Hongjin was guarding. It was as if he was guarding her. Fushi's divination only asked about things and not people. This was a rule he set for himself later. It was inevitable to foresee twists and turns when doing divination for others. In order to avoid twists and turns, he tried his best to avoid some encounters that might bring misfortune. But he didn't know that every encounter in the human world had its own precious fate. While avoiding the calamity, he had also fallen into another trap of fate, just like himself. He regretted it all his life. He was close at hand, but couldn't get it. In the depths of the dense forest, the screams became louder and louder, and more people came ashore. His zither music gradually became more and more intense, like a golden spear and armored horse, looming in the formation filled with killing intent. The formation wasn't omnipotent. The more people there were, the shorter the time it could be maintained, and the more energy it needed to consume. Back then, on Chiyun Mountain, when Taoist Yunji locked him in the formation, in order to get out as soon as possible, he ignored his injuries and forcibly broke the formation to study it. In the end, his mind was hurt. Over the years, he had never set up such an energy-consuming formation. A trace of blood slowly flowed out of Lu Buwang's lips. In the spring light, he smiled calmly, as if he was out of this world for the first time. It was as if he was still the young swordsman in white, standing in front of his sweetheart. Chapter 156. Battle cries filled the air on the canal as boats collided with each other. The Yudo surrounded the Jiang soldiers like vicious wolves. They outnumbered them, and the archers on the boats were ready. Arrows flew like shooting stars and pierced the boats of the Jiang soldiers into sieves in the blink of an eye. They could no longer sail. Although the Jiang soldiers who fell into the water could swim, they could not exert their strength in the water. The Yudo had also prepared many pitchforks, which looked like the tools fishermen used to spear fish. However, the tips were forged and sharp. They stabbed the Jiang soldiers who had fallen into the water. The water of the canal was quickly dyed red with blood. A young Jiang soldier dodged the sharp arrows shot from the Yudo's boat and jumped into the water. Dozens of Yudo laughed and stabbed him with the pitchforks in their hands. The Wutuo people were strong to begin with, and the young man was only 16 or 17 years old. He couldn't dodge in time and was stabbed in the arm. Immediately after, the pitchforks stabbed at him from all directions, piercing through his body. The pitchforks were quickly retrieved, leaving a bloody hole in his chest. He struggled for a while and sank. Only blood was left on the surface of the water, proving that he had been alive. The deputy soldier looked back and shouted at the young man in the middle of the chaotic battle, "Commander, we can't do it. They have too many people." There were too many people. 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. They were outnumbered. This was Nagwa City in the past. The only way to win by surprise was to attack with fire, but they still lacked an east wind. "No, we can't." Xiao Ju held a long sword in his hand. His gaze was as sharp as a blade. He said coldly, "Fight." Since he was the leader, he had been entangled in a chaotic battle. Maka was not a brainless person. Although he was arrogant, he had heard of Xiao Ju's name. Previously, he had used the Western Chang people as bait to ambush the Liangzhou guards. However, Xiao Ju's sudden return had disrupted the plan. Maka clearly remembered that the leader of the Western Chang, Rida Muzi, was extremely strong and fierce. However, he had died at the hands of Xiao Ju. Maka wanted to win. He wanted to take down Jiang City and claim credit from the monarch. But he did not want to lose his life for nothing. As he pushed back, he shouted to the Utayaban beside him. His Majesty said that whoever takes Xiao Huaijin's head will be the greatest contributor to this battle and will be conferred a noble title. Warriors, kill him. The motivation of military exploits was always useful at times like this. When the Yuchuo soldiers heard this, their blood boiled, and they immediately swarmed in front of Xiao Ju. This was the scene that Yin saw when he approached with his boat. The young commander-in-chief's cloak left a dark mark on the surface of the water. His long sword was as cold as ice, which made his handsome face look like a Rakshasa. He could take someone's life with a snap of his fingers. Wave after wave of people surged forward. Corpses had already piled up around him, but there was no sign of fatigue on the young man's face. He was as valiant as ever. "We can't go on like this." Yin frowned. There were too many Yudo. One Xiao Ju could fight against 10 or even 100, but what about 1,000 Yudo? What about 10,000? What about 100,000? Of course, he could fight his way out of the encirclement alone, but as long as the Yudo didn't come ashore, he would always have to stand in front of the civilians. The remaining Jiang City soldiers weren't enough to form a tacit understanding with him and cooperate seamlessly with him. Qi Wu and Fei Nu had both been arranged by Xiao Ju to Cui Yueji's side. He could only fight by himself. Yin thought for a moment, then said to the other people on the boat, "Do as I said. Row the boat to the position I drew and wait for orders. Don't go too far." "Mu-yi," she said to Mu-yi, "take this boat and follow me." After saying this, she put on Mu Hongjin's robe that Xu Zhao had given her. "You?" Mu-yi was stunned. "I disguised myself as Her Highness the Princess to draw some people away," Yin replied. "Otherwise, the commander-in-chief won't be able to hold on for so long. We have to disperse the Yudo's forces in order to delay them for a longer time. Even if you disguised yourself as Her Highness," Mu-yi couldn't help but say, "how do you know that they will definitely chase after us?" "You have to know," Yin shook his head, "destroy their strength, seize their crown, and disintegrate their bodies. When a dragon fights in the wild, its path is exhausted. Moreover, the Yudo would think that compared to capturing Xiao Huaijin, they would be more confident in capturing Mu Hongjin, a woman who didn't know any martial arts." She raised her head and looked into the distance. It was already noon, and the sun was high in the sky. It was already slightly hot, and there wasn't even a hint of wind. There was still no wind. Yin ordered the other boats to row further away. He and Mu-yi boarded the small boat alone and rowed in the direction of Xiao Ju. However, they didn't row too close. They only stopped at a place where the Yudo soldiers around Xiao Ju could see. They were a little anxious, as if they were lost. Where did that boat come from? Maka saw a small boat in the distance, on the other side of the soldier's boat, led by Xiao Ju. This small boat looked exactly the same as the other boats of Jiang City soldiers. There was a banner on it, but it was indescribably strange. This boat didn't get close to where they were fighting. Instead, it seemed like it wanted to escape. Deserter? Maka vaguely felt that something was strange. He ordered people to row the small boat to check it out. The small boat only rowed a little when the scout came back and reported, "General, the person sitting on the boat seems to be Princess Mengji. She should want to abandon the city and escape." Maka's spirit rose. Princess Mingji, did you see it clearly? This subordinate saw a woman wearing princess robes and a person dressed as a guard. I don't know if it's true. Maka thought for a moment, then said, Princess Mingji hasn't shown her face until now. She said she was in the prince's mansion to stabilize the soldiers' morale. I think it's very likely that she's planning to escape. That's right. She's just a woman. Without someone to rely on, she's probably already scared out of her wits. He laughed sinisterly. If that's the case, capture her. But his trusted aide beside him said, General, our boats are fighting with Xiao Huaijin. We can't capture Muhongjin. After all, Yudo Kingdom wasn't a water city. The Yudo soldiers weren't as proficient in water as Jiang City soldiers. Moreover, they had come by water. The mountains were long and the water was wide, so they used iron hooks to connect the thousands of boats. At this moment, it was impossible to untie the boats. If they chased after Muhongjin, they would have to give up on the battle with Xiao Ju. Idiot! Maka cursed. To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. So what if she's Xiao Huaijin? Xiao Huaijin isn't the master of Jiang City. If we capture Muhongjin, the Jiang City army will definitely fall into chaos. At that time, we'll win without a fight. There was one more thing he didn't say. Compared to Xiao Huaijin, Muhongjin was a woman. She was much easier to capture. Once we capture Muhongjin, this general will use her to knock on the gates of Jiang City. Xiao Huaijin must obediently surrender. Otherwise, I'll kill this woman in front of the Jiang City army. Maka's smile contained cruel malice. What do you think Xiao Huaijin will do? With Xiao Ju's reputation as a cold-blooded and heartless jade-faced commander-in-chief, he wouldn't even care about his biological father. What was Muhongjin to him? He naturally wouldn't surrender. Furthermore, Muhongjin was going to die anyway. If she died because Xiao Ju refused to lay down his weapon, the Jiang City army would naturally resent him. At that time, there would be internal strife, and the morale of the army would be in chaos. Jiang City would be nothing more than a sheet of loose sand. It would only be a matter of time before it collapsed. Turn the ship around and follow me. Maka smiled. The Yudo soldiers beside him didn't continue to surge forward wave after wave. The ship at the front turned around and sailed in another direction. The Jiang City army stopped what they were doing and asked, What's going on? Why did they suddenly stop fighting? Even though the Jiang City army had been trained by Xiao Ju for a few days, they hadn't been trained for many years. Their formations were also old-fashioned. Xiao Ju had only brought 15,000 men with him. At this moment, nearly half of them had been lost. If the Yudo pursued them, the situation would be even worse for the Jiang City army. However, at this critical juncture, they retreated. Xiao Ju looked in the direction where the Yudo ships had left. On the vast river, there was a small boat with a banner. There was a red dot on the boat, which was like a bright signal on the river, attracting people to chase after it. That's the princess? The soldier beside him muttered. No, it's Ian. Xiao Ju's eyes darkened. After a moment, he said, Follow them. They're catching up. Mu, he said nervously. Don't worry, Ian said. We only have 2 people on the boat. They're going after us, not the boat. You're a good swimmer. Later, hide in the water and don't show your face. What about you? Mu, he looked at her blankly. I'll give them a big gift. Ian smiled faintly. She took out an iron ball from her bosom. This iron ball had barbs on all sides and was extremely sharp. It looked like the giant claws of a wild beast. She pulled out a long whip from her waist. There was a buckle on the iron ball, and she fastened it to the long whip. This, Ian suddenly made her move. She threw the long whip in her hand at the reef. The iron ball sank into the reef, but it did not shatter. She quickly retracted her hand. On the reef, there were 5 empty holes. It was a frightening sight. If this thing was aimed at a person's heart, it could dig out a large piece of the person's chest. Mui could not help but shiver. He knew that Yin was not an ordinary girl. Her strength was astonishing. But seeing it with his own eyes, he was more and more shocked. Miss He, you want to use this to fight? This weapon was fierce, but it was not as agile as swords. She could only swing it once. Each whip could only kill 1 person. Before she could swing it a second time, the enemy would pounce on her. Moreover, what if the whip was cut in half? No, Hien shook her head. I'm going against the boat. Mu, he wanted to ask more questions, but Hien pushed him. Quickly get into the water. He subconsciously jumped into the water and hid behind a reef. He clenched the dagger in his hand. It was difficult to swing swords in the water. Only the dagger was agile, but it was not as agile as on land. The Uchuo military ship was taller and flatter than the small boat in Jiang City. From afar, Hien looked like a lamb forced into a strange path by a giant beast. Your Highness! Maka stood at the bow of the ship and shouted. Surrender. If you know what's good for you, maybe I will spare your life. He was determined to get Mu Hongjin. There was no one else on the small boat. Even the only guard was gone. Did the guard see that the situation was not good and left Mu Hongjin alone and ran away? TSK, the people of the Wei are always so weak. The red-robed woman stood at the bow of the ship with her head lowered. She did not say anything. The distance between the two boats was getting closer and closer. Just as Mako was about to order people to capture her, the woman suddenly raised her head and jumped from the boat. The small boat was not as tall as the big boat. She did not want to jump onto the Uchuo military ship. Instead, she jumped onto the hull of the ship. Her feet stepped on the hull of the Uchuo ship and swept past like lightning. Pung, 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 pung. Her speed was extremely fast. With every step, the whip in her hand would hit the hull of the ship. The iron ball hit the hull of the ship and was quickly taken away by the whip. Only 5 empty claw marks were left. Water poured in. What's that sound? What is she doing? Capture her. Quickly release the arrows. Quickly release the arrows. The arrows were like black rain falling from all directions. The woman easily dodged them as if she was walking on flat ground. As she moved, her robe fell with the wind, revealing the black armor underneath. She landed in the wind and stepped onto her own ship. Standing at the bow of the ship, she looked at the ship that was gradually tilting due to the water. Her lips curled into a mocking smile. I am illiterate. I don't know how to read. I don't know the word surrender. Her gaze landed on the flustered and exasperated Maka's face. Her words were as arrogant as usual. If you know what's good for you, kneel down and kowtow to me. Perhaps I will spare your life. Maka was stunned. After a while, he said angrily, You are not Mu Hongjin. How can a piece of trash like you trouble Her Highness to take action? Hien said with a smile, Her Highness should stay in the mansion. I can fight 3 people like you alone. Maka pulled out the long blade at his waist. I think you are courting death. But as soon as he finished speaking, the boat beneath him sank. Just now, Hien's whip had smashed the bottom of the ship one by one, creating a row of holes. At this moment, the water was pouring in and the ship was already unstable. The Utopian soldiers swayed left and right with the ship. The ship was gradually sinking. Quickly go to the ship on the side. In the chaos, someone said, No, the ships are all connected. We have to cut the iron hooks. For the sake of convenience, the ships were all connected head to tail. Now, it was a trap that they had dug for themselves. A large ship tilted and sank, dragging all the other ships with it. They could neither advance nor retreat. Cut the iron hooks. Quickly. The iron hooks were heavy and sturdy, not something that could be cut in 1 or 2 moves. The Utopian soldiers covered Maka and went to another ship. The rest of the people were carried by the sinking ship, frantically trying to cut the hooks. Voila, the iron hook was cut off and fell into the water, bringing the boat full of holes with it as it slowly sank. Some of the Utopian soldiers who did not have time to escape also fell into the water. Not everyone could swim. For a moment, the water was filled with cries and screams. It was very chaotic. Maka was furious. He looked up at the culprit, but saw that the girl had already taken advantage of the chaos to row the ship far away. Chase after her. Maka shouted. Catch her, I want to skin her. Being played by a girl in front of everyone was a great humiliation. How could he be willing to accept it? He rowed the ship across the water and reached out to Mui hiding behind a reef. He pulled him up. Quickly come up. Mui jumped onto the ship. He knew that there was no time to waste, so he immediately began to row. But when he glanced at Yen, he was shocked. He knew that Yen was very strong, but with just her strength, she had overturned a ship and it was not even a small ship. It was really shocking. Just now, Hien had stepped on the ship's side and swung the whip smoothly. Those Yudo did not even have time to react before they fell in her trap. In Mui's heart, besides admiration, there was also a faint excitement. He said to Hien, "Miss He, can we do what you did just now and overturn all their ships?" "Impossible," Hien replied quickly. "Now that we are in such a critical situation, how can we directly use the Iron Tiger Claw? Then why don't you do more?" As soon as he said that, Mui also felt that he had gone too far. Hien did not get angry. She only explained patiently, "It's useless to do more. They don't have as much strength as I do. Even if they do have great strength, they may not be able to accurately hit their ships." Her skills have been honed through a long period of military campaigns in the past. Although the weapon was important, the person using the weapon was more important. Moreover, this method can only be used once. The Yudo are already prepared. I'm afraid that they have already prepared archers on the ship. Before we even get close, they will shoot. That whip just now was just to delay a little. The longer we delay, the greater our chances of winning. If we keep delaying, will the wind really come? Mui looked at the sky. Such a clear sky, but it filled his heart with haze. It was difficult for him to have any confidence. If Master says there will be wind, there will definitely be wind. Hien's gaze was firm. If there is no wind, we will become the east wind. In short, don't stop fighting. She said, "Steer the ship in the direction of the ambush." On the other side, the Jiang city soldiers who were chasing after the Yudo soldiers also saw the scene just now. Everyone was stunned. Hien's skill of smashing the ship with the whip was difficult to forget. "Miss He is so powerful," someone murmured. It was not flattery, but even the most powerful person in the Jiang city army would not be able to do so. Strength and skill were secondary. What was more important was that she had to escape unscathed from so many Yudo soldiers. She had to grasp every moment with great precision. The Yudo's arrows were like rain. They were so dense, but they did not waver in the slightest. The ship was smashed, causing the Yudo to frantically cut the iron rings. Some Yudo who did not know how to swim were also drowned. The Jiang city soldiers, who had been suppressed before, felt slightly relieved. At this moment, they only felt happy. Xiaoju lowered her eyes and whispered, "I actually thought of something." She turned and ordered the deputy, "Take out the box." Before they boarded the ship, Xiaoju had ordered people to carry the box. It was very heavy. One person opened the box and saw that it was full of things like the end of the whip in Hien's hand, which looked like a tiger's claw. However, there was no whip. It was a sharp weapon that could be worn around the wrist. The 20 elite soldiers who knew how to swim stepped forward, Xiaoju said. The 20 elite soldiers who had been informed of the order in advance immediately stepped forward. Xiaoju looked at them and said in a calm and indifferent voice, "Take the iron claws and enter the water." In the distance, the large ship was chasing after Hien's small boat with all its might. There were only 2 people paddling the small boat. How could it compare to the large ship? Hien will be caught up very quickly. 20,000 against 150,000 was a very difficult matter. He also knew that this battle was difficult to win. Moreover, the heavens might not be perfect. He had to be fully prepared for everything. This box of iron claws was his secret weapon. However, he didn't expect that she had the same idea as Hien. However, she was in the light, while he was in the dark. "Smash the ship," he said. The sound of the zither and the sound of fighting on the river in the distance formed a sharp contrast. The spring sun and the battlefield were 2 completely unrelated things. The sunlight shone on the man in white, making his clothes even cleaner. At a glance, it seemed that he was still the young man in white. A drop of blood dripped onto the zither in front of him. The zither string seemed to move and made a very soft sound. The seemingly clear zither sound also became sad because of this. Roars and shouts came from the depths of the dense forest. There were more and more Yudo, crushing and trampling the flowers on the roadside. However, they couldn't continue moving forward, as if they were imperceptibly hindered. The seemingly peaceful and happy spring scenery had become a killing weapon, and there were ambushes everywhere. More and more blood dripped from Lu Buwang's lips, and the sound of the zither became more and more urgent. There were too many people. His formation couldn't stop too many people. It was already very difficult for him to do this. The old injury from his early days in seclusion on the mountain started to ache again. Lu Buwang knew very well that he couldn't hold on for long. However, he still had to stop them here. The longer he stopped them here, the longer Cui Yueji's side could hold on. The more Yudo he killed here, the more time Cui Yueji's people could have. The people in Jiang City would be safer, and so would she. The peach blossom smiled sweetly out of the fence. It was the most affectionate of all. In his life, there was only one peach blossom that seemed to have bloomed. He couldn't see this peach blossom bloom to the end. It was good to take care of it a little longer. With a clang, the zither string in his hand seemed to be unable to bear it, and suddenly broke. The zither sound stopped abruptly, and Lu Buwang spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood fell on the surface of a zither in front of him, and some splashed into the grass on the ground. It was like the peach blossoms in March, pretty and affectionate. Without the zither sound, the footsteps in the depths of the dense forest quickened and were right in front of him. Since the formation had been broken, he slowly stood up. Who is that? Who is it? Why is there only one person? Is there an ambush? After breaking the formation, the Yudo broke in. However, because of the ambush in the forest just now, he was afraid. Seeing that Lu Buwang was alone in front, he was afraid that there would still be an ambush around, so no one dared to come forward for a while. The two sides were in a stalemate for a moment. In the end, the Yudo was bolder because he had more people. After a while, he laughed and said, "It's just one person. Even if there is an ambush, there aren't many soldiers left in Jiang City. We'll kill as many ambushes as there are. What are you afraid of?" The man in white in front of him didn't move at all. His clothes were neat and tidy, like an immortal. In the past, his black hair was tied up with white silk, and he looked otherworldly and cold. Now, his hair was gradually turning gray, but his back view, which was as reassuring as a tree, had never changed. He would always protect the people he wanted to protect. A gentle breeze blew past, causing his hair tied to sway slightly, causing his robes to sway gently, and causing ripples to appear in the man's watery eyes. He was stunned at first, and then a smile slowly appeared on his lips. The chance of survival in this death game had come. The hope of Jiang City had come. The wind had come. Lu Buwang slowly pulled out the long sword at his waist. Chapter 157. Above the canal, the battle was in full swing. Xiao Ju ordered 20 elite soldiers to dive into the water with their iron claws and pierce through the Yudo ships. There were thousands of Yudo ships, and it was impossible to pierce through all of them. It was also difficult to exert their strength underwater. 10 people formed a group, and they picked the 2 in the middle to attack. As a result, the Yudo ships that were connected to the hooks were thrown into chaos. They hurriedly cut off the hooks and watched Yan's boat escape in front of them. These bastards! Maka was furious. He snatched the bow from the soldier beside him and shot arrows at the soldiers in the water. However, the 20 selected were all experts in the water. They were agile and immediately avoided the arrows. They attacked when the enemy chased and retreated when the enemy advanced. This caused the Yudo's pace to be disrupted. Continue to use the pitchfork. Maka ordered with a serious face. I don't believe that they can stay underwater forever. Capture that woman first. The woman who pretended to be Mu Hongjin had greatly humiliated him. The Yudo men were the most prideful. If they did not capture that woman today, his subordinates and confidants would secretly laugh at him. Even if they won the battle, when they returned to Yudo City, this matter would become a laughingstock and spread everywhere. Unless they captured that woman and ruthlessly tortured her, they would not be able to regain their dignity. Chase after them. A slight breeze fell on their faces, causing a slight itch. It was very small, but it was immediately noticed. Ian looked at Mu Yi. Mu Yi's eyes were filled with surprise. There's wind. Although it was a gentle breeze, the heavens were on their side at the end of the day. The ships behind them were chasing relentlessly. Ian's face sank. Lead them into the ambush. Yes. The small boat seemed to want to escape from the water, desperately rowing into the distance. However, compared to the tall ship beside it, it looked somewhat pitiful. "Where are they going?" the deputy beside him asked. Xiaoju looked in the direction Yan's boat had gone. The canal was calm. If he remembered correctly, there should be several hidden reefs in the water in the direction she had gone. If it was a small boat, they could naturally avoid it. If it was a large ship, Xiaoju, follow them and disperse Yudo's forces. "Commander-in-Chief, the wind is blowing." He lowered his eyes and said coldly. The wind was still gentle, like the gentle frolicking of lovers, passing through everyone. Mu-Yi paddled with all his might and asked Yan, "Miss He, can we start the fire now?" "No," Yan said, "the wind is not strong enough." The wind was not strong enough. Even if a fire was lit, the thousands of Utho warships could not immediately sink into the sea of fire. They had all sorts of ways to put out the fire immediately. The timing of the battle was very important. What should we do now? They're about to catch up. Mu-Yi was anxious. Yan looked back and said, "I'll hold them back." "You?" Mu-Yi was worried. "Can you do it alone? Let me accompany you." "No need." Yan patted him on the shoulder. "You take the ship and stay in your position with the other ships. If the Utho warships see our ship, they will most likely come and deal with us. You must protect the ship." She paused and said, "Protect yourselves." But before Mu-Yi could finish his words, Yan had already stepped on the bow of the ship and swept towards Maka's ship. "Miss He, why is he going alone?" The deputy soldier was surprised. Xiaoju said, "Let's do it." Bang! The small boat collided with the large ship, causing it to tilt slightly. Maka's face was ashen. "Why are you still here?" He laughed sinisterly. "You want to stop a chariot with just a few thousand people? Since you want to die so much, this general will send you on your way." He waved his sword and shouted to his people, "Warriors, let's fight." The two sides stood together. Although the Jiang city army was outnumbered, they were not afraid. Yan and Xiaoju, who were in the lead, mingled with the people around Maka. Yan had a whip with iron claws. When the iron claws were attached, they were very good at smashing ships, but they were also good at smashing people. When she waved her whip, a person would be knocked down. However, the whip was not a sword. When it pierced a person, it could not be retracted for a while. More and more Yudo rushed up, and they were already behind her. She kicked away a person in front of her, and a strong wind came from behind her. Yan dodged to the side, and a sparkling sword blocked in front of her. Xiaoju's back was facing her, and the sword in her hand was dripping with blood. She pulled autumn wine out from the Yudo's chest and reminded softly, "Be careful." "Commander," Yan said, "let's fight together." The two of them stood back to back, one holding a sword and the other holding a whip. They had their backs to each other, and at this moment, they trusted each other wholeheartedly. They had never fought together against an enemy before, but in the face of life and death, they had a wonderful tacit understanding. It was as if they understood each other, and their hearts were connected. They did not need to remind each other of their actions, and they naturally understood each other's intentions. For a moment, the Yudo could not get close to them. The deputy commander pushed away a Yudo, and when she turned around, she saw this scene. She thought for a moment, and only said, "What is the background of this Miss He? She is so skilled." She did not rely on Xiaoju to save her, or Xiaoju to protect her. She was able to cooperate with Xiaoju at the same time. Not only did she not hinder Xiaoju, she even cooperated with her with ease. "General, this woman is so powerful," the trusted aide said to Maka. Xiao Huaijin was powerful because he was the commander of the right army of Dawei, General Fengyan. He had never heard of this woman's name, and she did not look old. How could she be so powerful? Could it be that there were many talented people in Dawei's army, and Xiao Huaijin was not the only one with such skills? For a moment, Maka regretted volunteering to come to Jiang. He saw that Jiang did not have many soldiers, and there was only one woman, Mu Hongjin, in charge. He thought that it would be easy to take down Jiang, and that was why he took the credit. Who knew that he would meet Xiaoju and a troublesome woman? When these two people worked together, their skills were already outstanding. There was also the Jiang City Army. Just a few days ago, the spy reported that the Jiang City Army had not fought for many years, and their formations were old. They were no match for the Yudo. When they fought today, they realized that the Jiang City Army's morale was high, and their morale had not decreased. Even their formations were different from before. Although the Jiang City Army was reduced by more than half, it was unimaginable that the 150,000 Yudo soldiers could not take down the city immediately. Instead, they had suffered a lot. Increase the number of people. Charge! Maka gritted his teeth as he looked at the man and woman surrounded by the Yudo. I don't believe that they can defeat my 150,000 soldiers. The mast on the ship did not move, but the flag hanging on it started to sway. It was not a slight sway like before, but a movement that could be seen like a bird spreading its wings. The wind is blowing. Ian could not hide the excitement in his voice. Commander-in-Chief, the wind is really blowing. It was not a gentle breeze, but more like a cool breeze. Perhaps it would become a strong gale or a strong gale. Furthermore, it's the southeast wind. Ian smiled until his eyes turned into crescents. He was especially happy. It's the southeast wind, Commander-in-Chief. Xiao Zhu glanced at him and said, "We can lure them into the trap now." Ian looked at him, and a smile flashed across his face. He jumped up and said, "Let's go." The two of them broke out of the encirclement and jumped onto a small boat of the Jiang City Army, as if they were exhausted. The Jiang City Army on the boat paddled with all their might, as if they wanted to take them far away. "Want to run?" Maka sneered and waved his hand. "Chase after them. We must take these two's heads today." At this juncture, the number of Jiang City Army soldiers was decreasing. It was obvious that Xiao Huijin and the woman were outnumbered. Maka had doubts in his heart. Was Xiao Huijin the kind of person who would abandon his troops and run away? However, this doubt was quickly washed away by the joy of the imminent victory. No matter how brave and invincible they would not be able to turn the tables with so few people. The people of the Great Way like to say the most. As long as the green hills remain, one need not worry about firewood. Perhaps the two of them saw that the situation was not good, and wanted to escape first, hide their strength, bide their time, and then make a comeback. Maka was going to chase them to the end today. His trusted aide was still a little hesitant. "General, don't chase a cornered enemy. Why don't we wipe out the remaining Jiang City Army first? The right way is to go ashore and enter the city." "What do you know?" Maka said contemptuously. "The Jiang City Army is already in shambles. If we capture Xiao Huijin," greed flashed in his eyes, "the king will only reward me generously. This is a battle achievement that will go down in history." Everyone in the Wu Tuo kingdom knew that he had led troops to attack the city. In the end, not only did he take down Jiang City, but even Xiao Huijin, who was feared by the world, died under his sword. Speaking of which, this life was worth bragging about. Moreover, he had suffered a lot at the hands of the woman who pretended to be Mu Hongjin. Maka was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance, so he could not be reconciled. For a moment, he only hoped to kill them all. Chase! The small boats moved quickly in front of them. Under the vast and mighty canal, there were countless unremarkable submerged reefs. The merchant ships that passed by were already familiar with this and avoided them from a distance. However, these Yudo might not know. They might not know what kind of sharp weapons were hidden in the small boats that were scattered all over the place. "General, do you see those small boats?" the trusted aide asked Maka. Dozens of small boats appeared around the surface of the water. These small boats seemed to belong to the Jiang City Army, but the people on them were not as large as the Jiang City armies. They were scattered at the ends of the boats. The faintly discernible distance seemed to be harboring evil intentions. The ominous premonition grew stronger and stronger. The trusted aide said, "General, is this an ambush? Do you want us to?" "What ambush? If you're afraid, go back to your hometown as soon as possible. The Wu Tuo army does not raise cowards." Maka kicked the person beside him away. "You call an ambush with just these few boats? Are you trying to make me laugh my head off?" We have so many boats and so many people. This is not an ambush. It's a suicide mission. I think it's a good idea. Get ready. When they get closer, shoot the arrows." The trusted aide thought about it and felt that Maka's words made sense. These Jiang boats were like moths to a flame. Even if they rushed over from all directions, they did not seem to have any chance of winning. Tian's signal had already been sent out, and the other ships led by Mu Yi from before were all approaching this side. Tian turned to look at the Wu Tua army's boats behind him. They were getting closer and closer. At the same time, the wind was getting stronger. The flags on the boat fluttered in the wind, and the joy in her heart rippled out layer by layer. She cannot suppress it. "Should we?" Tian asked Xiaoju. Xiaoju's mouth twitched. "Yes." The two of them ordered the Jiang city soldiers around them to stop paddling. "Quickly enter the water." Plop, plop, plop. The sound of people falling into the water came one after another. The people on the Wu Tua army's boats were stunned. They only asked, "Why do they all jump into the water?" "Prepare the pitchforks. Even if they fall into the water, we can still fight," Maka said gloomily. They just thought that they had exhausted all their abilities and were at the end of the road. Tian smiled slightly. With one foot on the bow of the boat, he took out a flint. "TSK." A very soft sound came from her hand, but no one took it to heart. The girl's eyes were bright, and she smiled slyly. "I'll give you a big gift. Take it." A spark streaked across the sky like a shooting star. The next moment, it landed on the boat. At the same time, the sound of Jiang City's soldiers falling into the water could be heard from all directions. The spark landed on the opened curtain and the dry firewood covered in oil. With a loud boom, a huge ball of fire exploded on the boat, almost illuminating the entire sky. The Wu Tua army's boats were quickly engulfed by the fire. The wind became stronger and blew the entire flame towards the Wu Tua army's boats. The commotion on the canal seemed to have spread to Jiang City. Lin Shuanghe walked out of the Chui residence's backyard. He looked into the distance and muttered to himself, "What's that sound?" Beside him, Zhongfu was also listening, but he could not answer his question. After a while, Zhongfu looked at Lin Shuanghe and asked, "Young Master Lin, are you really going to stay here?" He already knew Lin Shuanghe's true identity. The so-called elegant butler Lin really did not exist in this world. At least, he had never seen one in his life. This young man looked refined and refined. He heard that he was a doctor, but he was different from Xiaoju and Hiyan. He did not have any martial arts. Why would he stay here if he did not evacuate with the people? "There are still so many sisters in this residence," Lin Shuanghe said with a smile. "If I leave, who will protect them?" Zhongfu was speechless for a moment. He spoke as if he was very powerful. "Chui Zhongqi's wives are still in the residence. Even my sisters dare to stay, so how can I escape alone? I am a man." Lin Shuanghe waved his fan, his smile as confident as before. "A man should protect the ladies." Second concubine looked through the window at Lin Shuanghe, who was talking to Zhongfu. She rested her chin on her hand and said, "This young Master Lin looks so weak, but I didn't expect him to be so manly at critical moments. If I were 10 years younger, so what?" Concubine Wei glared at her. "You still have the mood to think about these things at a time like this. I was just saying it casually." "Sister, why are you so agitated?" Second concubine stretched lazily. "It's hard to say if we can live past today. Can't you just let me dream for a while?" Pay, fourth concubine said. "Second sister, don't jinx it. Laoi will definitely defeat those Yudo. Not only can we live past today, we can live past tomorrow, and we can live for a very, very long time. Didn't Laoi say that young Master Qiao Huanqing is actually Do Wei's General Fengyan? With General Fengyan, we can win this battle no matter what. Don't worry." She spoke quickly and anxiously, as if she was very confident. However, it was unknown whether she was comforting others or convincing herself. Third concubine loved to cry. Tears had swirled in her eyes for a long time. When she heard this, she finally could not hold it in. She cried and said, "So what if he's General Fengyan? How many years has it been since we've fought a war in the city? We don't have as many soldiers as commoners. He's not a god. I'm still so young. I don't want to die. Ileoi hasn't doted on me for long. I'm so scared. Don't cry. Concubine Wei shouted with a sullen face. She saw third concubine shrink back and still could not hold back her tears. Finally, she sighed and handed her a handkerchief. Her voice softened. What are you afraid of? Although we're concubines, we're still people of the Middle Cavalry Manor. Without Leoi protecting us at the front, we'll be dragging him down by crying and wailing in the back. Even if we're concubines, women, we're still women of the Middle Cavalry Manor. We must have integrity and not fear death. If we win this battle and Leoi comes back alive, we'll celebrate. We'll prepare food and soup as a reward to reassure him. If we lose, Leoi won't be able to come back. We won't beg for our lives under the Yudo's hands. The rope is in our hands. Everyone will die. It's just a matter of sooner or later. For better or worse, we sisters are in the same place. Even if there's no way to survive, we can take care of each other on the road to the Yellow Springs. What are you afraid of? She said. Second concubine giggled. Tears seemed to flash in her eyes. She smiled and held third concubine's hand. She only said, "That's right. We sisters are in the same place. What's there to be afraid of?" Third concubine sniffled and wiped away the tears on her face. She refused to speak. Fourth concubine looked out the window and muttered, "It's windy. It's windy." Mu Hongjin looked at the trees outside the window. At first, it was just a small breeze. Then it grew stronger and stronger. It blew the willow tree branches in all directions, as if they would be uprooted in the next moment. A layer of shallow waves appeared in the pond. Inside and outside the Wang Fu, it was empty except for a few old people who had always been by her side. She had let those who could leave. As for the commoners who followed them out of the city, if they could leave, then they could. There was no reason for them to be buried here in vain. What was that sound just now? She asked the maid beside her. The maid shook her head. That's true. Mu Hongjin sighed. How would you know? That loud sound was hair-raising. It could be heard both inside and outside the city. It seemed to have come from the direction of the canal. The servants who had been sent to gather information had come twice. They both said that the Yuchuo soldiers were currently fighting with the Jiang City Army, led by Xiao Ju on the water. The Yuchuo soldiers had not yet come ashore to enter the city, but more than half of the Jiang City Army had been lost. The situation was unbalanced, and they were no match for the enemy. This battle had truly been difficult for Xiao Huaijin. Mu Hongjin thought to herself. She somewhat hated her own incompetence. If only she knew how to mobilize troops and break through enemy lines, then she would not have to sit in this empty Wang Fu, futilely and powerlessly waiting for an end. If the city fell, she would be buried with it. If the city survived, she would continue to live. It seemed that this was all she could do right now. The wind blew in from outside the window and blew the mirror she had placed on the soft seat with a bang. It fell to the ground. Mu Hongjin was startled. She walked over and picked up the mirror. It had already fallen once, leaving a small crack on the mirror. This fall was even more vicious than last time. The crack covered the entire surface of the mirror. She had only just reached out to touch it when the mirror shattered. The shattered mirror fell onto the soft carpet. It was like a jewel falling into the sky, but also like a memory scattered in the depths of her heart. Her heart suddenly ached. She bent over, and for some reason, tears streamed down her cheeks. In the depths of the forest, the white-clothed swordsman was surrounded by several dozen Yudo. Blood dripped from a long sword in his hand. His white robes had long been stained red with blood. It was impossible to tell if it was his or someone else's blood. Go! The Yudo around him surged in wave after wave. This person's swordsmanship was superb. He was able to take on 10 of them by himself, and he had yet to fall. However, he had also suffered many injuries. His arm had been slashed by the Wutua's saber, leaving a long scar on his arm. His leg was also bleeding, but his posture remained light and graceful, like the clouds and mist on Chiyun Mountain, elusive and elusive. At the same time, he was like an immortal descending from the ninth heaven to experience a tribulation. He was always calm and always smiled. He made the massacre around him look like an immortal. He was like the heroic young swordsman in the stories of the past. With a sword and a zither, the sky was high and the land was wide. However, heroes also had times when they were defeated. Lu Buwang's eyes gradually began to blur, and his vision became blurry. He had spent a lot of energy setting up the formation just now, and it had affected his old illness. At this moment, he was just an arrow at the end of its flight. However, the longer he could hold on, the more peaceful Jiang City would be. The wind had gradually picked up. The smile on his lips grew brighter and brighter, as if he had listened to a girl in a red dress teasing him many years ago. He pretended to be bored, but he would turn his back and secretly smile without realizing it. A blade slashed at his face. Lu Buwang jumped to avoid it. As he moved, something flew out of his arms. He subconsciously reached out to grab it and held it in his palm. It was a silver bracelet. There was a circle of small wild daisies engraved on the edge of the bracelet. Because of the passage of time, the not-so-delicate edges had been worn down. It still had the body temperature of a person and was slightly hot. Someone once said to him, "This is called a happy bracelet. Give it to your sweetheart and wear it for the rest of your life." The 17-year-old Mu Hongjin begged him, "Young hero Lu, quickly give me one." However, he replied coldly, "She's not my sweetheart." However, when he went back to the mountain with Yushu and met the old woman again at the foot of Qin Mountain, he took out money to buy that bracelet. At that time, Lu Buwang didn't understand why he did this. He tried to convince himself that he was afraid that Mu Hongjin would be bored waiting in the inn alone. When she came back, she would definitely put on an act. So, this bracelet was a gift to shut her up. Unfortunately, he wouldn't have a chance to give it to her for many years in the future. Perhaps there had been a moment, or perhaps there had been many moments, when he really wanted to be with that beautiful and bright girl for the rest of his life. Poof! A long saber stabbed him from behind, and the tip of the saber pierced through his chest, as if it wanted to cut open his heart and let him see clearly who his sweetheart was. The Wutuo behind him laughed heartily and said, "This head is mine. No one can snatch the military merit from me." There was a noisy roar of laughter around. Lu Buwang fell down. When he fell down, he was still holding the happy bracelet tightly in his hand. The wind was like a girl's hand, gently stroking his eyebrows. He lay on his back and no longer had the strength to stand up. In a trance, he seemed to have returned to many years ago when he went down the mountain for the first time. At that time, when he was riding a horse with a sword, he was also very heroic. His senior brother laughed and teased him. "Women at the foot of the mountain are tigers. Don't be confused by the world of mortals." He curled his lips and didn't take it seriously. As soon as he turned his head, he saw a girl in a red dress with a long braid sitting under a tree, and peach blossoms were falling like rain. Chapter 158. The canal was engulfed in a sea of fire and smoke. Yudo's screams, panic cries, and Maka's orders were mixed together. In the end, they were all silenced by the crackling sound of wood being torn apart by the fire. This east wind came late, but it was strong. As if knowing that they were late, they desperately refused to stop. Thousands of Yudo soldiers' boats were connected by iron hooks. The fire came quickly, and before they could escape, they were all engulfed in the sea of fire in the blink of an eye. It was rare for a smart Yudo to be slightly further away. They used all their strength to cut off the hooks, but the smoke was thick and they couldn't tell the direction. There were submerged reefs everywhere. If they accidentally bumped into one, the boat would capsize. At this time, the small boats of Jiang City's army showed their advantage. The small boats were agile and connected to the water. Even if they couldn't tell the direction, they were still Jiang people. Everyone knew the water and left easily. Even if they were affected by the fire, Jiang people knew how to swim. They dived into the water early and swam to the shore. Most of them were unharmed. The Yudo soldiers were not so lucky. Not many of them could escape from this fire attack. Even if they did, their morale was in chaos. They were probably defeated before the battle even started. Under the water, He Yin and Xiao Ju swam to the shore. The moment the fire was lit, Xiao Ju had already grabbed her and jumped into the water. The spring water was still cold. Hien knew how to swim, but when the water reached her eyes and nose, her body unconsciously stiffened. It was as if she had returned to the Su family and was drowned in the pond by He Wanru's people. Because of this, the sky above the water was getting farther and farther away from her. She was forever left underwater, unable to see the light. In the beginning, he could still barely hold on, but after a period of time, it became more and more difficult for him to force it. His body's discomfort was always quickly dealt with, but the fear in his heart, the shadow left behind by a certain incident, was not something that could be easily forgotten. She gradually fell behind Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju, who was in front, seemed to have sensed something. Seeing Hien fall behind him with a rarely seen, pained expression, she couldn't help but be slightly startled. Hien had never mentioned in front of Xiao Ju whether he could swim or not, but he definitely could. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to hold on until now when he jumped off the boat. But now, it seemed that he was afraid of water. This was also possible. For example, people who had been burned by fire in the past would later avoid fire when they saw it. A man who fell from a horse and got injured would never get back on a horse again, even if he was an expert horseman. Hien should be able to swim, but he was afraid of water, probably like those people. Just as he thought of this, he saw Hien's eyes close and his expression change. Xiao Ju frowned. She didn't even change her breathing. If this continued, she would suffocate to death. He turned back to Hien's side and pressed Hien's shoulder, trying to wake Hien up. However, Hien seemed to have lost most of her senses and did not respond to his actions. She looked pained. Perhaps she was thinking of some bad memories. Even under the water, he could vaguely see that she was nervous. Xiao Ju looked up. There was still some distance to the shore. If this continued, she would die. The girl's face was very close to him. She was underwater. Her long hair had already scattered and the dirt on her face had been washed away. Her facial features were as clear and fragile as glass, as if they were about to disappear underwater. Xiao Ju made up his mind. He took a deep breath, pressed down on her shoulder, and leaned over to kiss her. Hien felt as if someone was supporting her. She opened her eyes in a daze and seemed to see a handsome young man's face right in front of her. She felt as if someone was supporting her. She opened her eyes in a daze and seemed to see the young man's handsome face right in front of her. Was it a dream? Hien thought to herself. Why did she have a wet dream at a time of life and death? The subject of this wet dream was extremely handsome, but the location was unexpectedly in the water. It was quite regrettable. She couldn't remember anything else. A chill slowly spread from her face. Hien coughed and spat out a mouthful of water. She suddenly sat up. Beside her was Mui. Seeing that she had woken up, he heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Miss He, you're finally awake." They were on the shore. On the surface of the canal in the distance, there was still smoke billowing and a sea of fire. She still remembered that she and Xiao Ju had jumped into the water. When she looked back, there was no trace of Xiao Ju beside her. She asked, "Where's the commander-in-chief? Why am I here?" As soon as I reached the shore, I saw the commander-in-chief carrying you out. Miss He, you looked like you had fainted. The commander-in-chief asked me to take care of you and left. He scratched his head. There are many Yudo on the shore. There aren't enough soldiers in Jiang City. Missy, you rest here. I'll go and help first. No need. Hien casually pulled out a piece of cloth from the hem of her inner clothes, tied up her long hair that had spread out in the water, and stood up. I'll go with you. At the mouth of the gourd, there was also a fierce battle at the moment. Previously, Lu Buwang used a formation to trap a group of Yudo. After the Yudo broke the formation, they fought fiercely with Lu Buwang. In the end, their morale was damaged, and they were greedy for merit. When they reached the mouth of the gourd, they were all impetuous and didn't notice the hidden danger at all. Chui Yueji's archers were lying in ambush in the dark shot arrows and caught the Yudo off guard. At this moment, there were not many Yudo left, and they were fighting with the 5,000 soldiers of Jiang City arranged by Chui Yueji. I wonder what the situation on the river is like. Chui Yueji was thinking in his heart when he suddenly saw someone come over and say loudly, "Sir, the east wind is rising. Military Governor Xiao has already attacked the Yudo's ships with fire. The Yudo is now in a mess and has been defeated." "Really?" Chui Yuezhi was overjoyed. "God bless Jiang." On the other side, when the Yudo heard this, he was immediately in a mess. While instructing the soldiers around him not to believe the enemy's trick to disturb the morale of the army, he couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. They were originally arranged to go ashore first, and the army would arrive later. However, as soon as they went ashore, they encountered the white-clothed swordsmen. They were entangled for a long time just by walking out of the formation. It had been so long, and the army should have arrived a long time ago. Why was there no movement now? Their morale was boosted at the first spurt, then weakened at the second, and exhausted at the third. Chui Yuezhi's side became braver as they fought, and the Yudo soldiers retreated in defeat. "Boys," Chui Yuezhi shouted, "fight with me." On the bank of the canal, the Yudo soldiers who had escaped from the Sea of Fire were fighting fiercely with the soldiers of Jiang City. When Hien rushed over, the sound of swords clashing could be heard all around. Chui Yuezhi wasn't here. The several dozen people who had set the ship on fire with Hien had spontaneously followed Hien's lead. The Yudo soldiers no longer have the advantage in numbers. "At least, the difference isn't too great now," Hien said. The fire had buried most of the Yudo. Although there were still more Yudo soldiers left in Jiang City, the difference wasn't too great. Besides, their morale is definitely low right now. We can use this opportunity to catch them all in one fell swoop. Hien tightened his grip on the whip in his hand. "Go!" On the edge of the ship, she immediately saw Xiao Ju surrounded by Yudo. These were Maka's trusted aides. It seemed that Maka hadn't been able to escape when the fire had been set. When the remaining aides saw that their master was gone, they knew that they would die if they returned. Thus, they all turned their attention to Xiao Ju. They wanted to drag her down with them. If they could kill Xiao Ju, they might be able to make up for their mistakes. The Yudo were packed densely together, taking turns to attack Xiao Ju. Hien rushed into the crowd with his whip, knocking down a person with each strike. He then kicked away the person in front of him and retreated to Xiao Ju's side. Xiao Ju was slightly surprised. "Why are you here?" "Of course I'm here," Hien said. "We agreed to advance and retreat together. I'm still hoping that if I succeed this time, the commander-in-chief will report me to the imperial court and give me an official position or something." Xiao Ju sneered. "In your dreams." Hien slowly held his whip horizontally in front of him. "Wouldn't it be a waste if I don't even dream in my dreams?" He rushed into the crowd. This group of Yudo was extremely cunning and cruel. They only attacked Xiao Ju and Hien with all their might. It was as if they had gone crazy and wanted to fight to the death. The remaining soldiers of Jiang City and the rest of the Yudo were mixed together. They couldn't get close at all. Hien was slightly annoyed. The number of soldiers of Jiang City was too small. Moreover, these Yudo were no longer fighting a war. They were just gathering to kill Xiao Ju and her. "I have to get rid of their leader first," she thought to herself. While she was thinking, she saw that the group of Yudo suddenly increased the intensity of their attacks. Logically speaking, since they were killing people and she had caused them to suffer such a great loss, they shouldn't ignore her. However, their momentum was directed at Xiao Ju alone. What were they trying to do? Hien became vigilant. He subconsciously retreated and wanted to warn Xiao Ju. However, just as he turned around, he heard a boom. The small boat of Jiang City soldiers that was docked, together with Xiao Ju and the Yudo, exploded with a loud sound, just like the fireboat in the middle of the river just now. Hien was also blown to the shore by the explosion. She immediately got up and looked into the distance. Her mind buzzed and she shouted, "Xiao Ju!" The fragments of the boat were everywhere, and the water was violently churning from the explosion. Someone came to pull her hand and pulled her back. It was Mu-Yi. Mu-Yi said, "This is a firearm. I've heard that some of the Yudo's craftsmen know how to make firearms, but it's extremely rare. I didn't expect them to bring one with them today. They must be targeting military Governor Xiao." Hien had also heard of firearms before. However, it was very difficult to make firearms, and it cost a lot of money. Even if they could make 10 of them, they might not be able to use them. The Fuyua army had limited funds back then, so they gave up in the end. The Yudo probably didn't have many firearms, otherwise they could have thrown dozens of them at the beginning. Presumably, seeing that Maka was no longer here, he followed the idea of both sides suffering losses and dragged Xiao Ju down with him. Damn it! She gritted her teeth and turned around to run in the direction of the explosion. Misty, he pulled her back and said anxiously, "There are still fragments of firearms around. It's very likely that there will be another explosion. It's very dangerous for you to go now." Ian shook off his hand. He wanted to persuade her again, but when he saw her expression, he suddenly paused and let go of her. Ian turned around and ran into the water. There were more and more Yudo around them, blocking in front of Ian. She simply swung her whip and sneered. She jumped up and snatched the long swords from two Yudo's hands. With two swords in hand, she didn't hesitate at all. As she pulled out her swords, the enemy fell down. Her hands and feet were tied. She couldn't use her sword to save herself from exposing herself, but at least she could use her swords. But what was the use of this? If only she could be a little earlier. Ian's heart suddenly choked with sobs. There was nothing on the surface of the water, only fragments of the floating ship. Xiao Ju's figure was nowhere to be seen. That person, the person who pulled her out of a desperate situation, the person who remembered her birthday, made her longevity noodles, took her to see fireflies, the person who laughed at her and indulged her in the spring. How could she disappear here? She had to get to the surface of the water quickly and find Xiao Ju quickly. Lin Shuanghe was still in Jiang. If she could find him quickly, there might still be hope. There weren't many people in this world who were good to her. The one who was the best to her must not die. The Yudo was too much of a hindrance. Hian's eyes were cold and sharp. The long swords in her hands danced, dazzling the onlookers. Her footsteps didn't stop. She just desperately rushed to the place where the explosion occurred. He looked at the girl's figure and only felt that there was nothing in the world that could stop her. Her hands were as agile as an eagle's and as sharp as a knife. He didn't know that women could be like this. The Yudo pounced forward, but Ian waved them away. Just like this, she pressed forward, the corpses of the Yudo soldiers behind her. Finally, she reached the surface of the water. "Xiao Ju," she shouted. No one answered. "Xiao Ju." Ian bent down and tried to fish something out of the water, but when she raised her hand, only water flowed through the gaps between her fingers. There was nothing left. It was empty. She was a little confused, so confused that she couldn't tell what the uncontrollable sadness in her heart was. This feeling was like the day she suddenly became blind. It was like the day she was pressed into the water by He Wanru's people. She was about to lose something very important. It was so sad. "Xiao Ju," she muttered. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from behind her. "What are you shouting for?" She suddenly turned around and saw a young man in black armor striding over. There seemed to be a hint of mockery in his cold eyes. From the shore to the shallow water, there were Yudo bodies that she had just killed in anger. The corpses fell to the side. It was clear that the knife technique was exquisite and cruel. They were all killed with one strike. The young man raised his eyebrows. His gaze fell on the long knife in her hand that was dripping with blood. After a moment, he looked at her with a faint smile. So fierce. The next moment, the girl suddenly rushed over and threw herself into his arms. Her hands tightly wrapped around his waist, and she buried her face in his chest. The Jiang city soldiers behind them on the shore were stunned. Xiao Ju's body stiffened. Her eyes were slightly annoyed. The next moment, he closed his mouth because he felt the body in his arms trembling violently. She had jumped into the water earlier and almost suffocated herself in the water. Her inner clothes were already soaked, and the heavy armor on her body looked exceptionally cold. It made her seem especially fragile. Xiao Ju tried to endure it, but in the end, he couldn't help but pull her face out his arms. "What are you doing? I'm not dead yet." He sneered. Ian stared at him in a daze. This person was standing in front of her, alive and well. He was alive and well. He was right in front of her. Tears suddenly fell from her eyes. Chapter 159. The girl's tears were like fragile dewdrops as they rolled down her cheeks. For a moment, they seemed to be scalding. Thinking about it carefully, this was the first time Xiao Ju had seen He Yin cry. He was startled and thought to himself, in the end, she's still a girl. No matter how powerful she is normally, it's still a bit scary to see her flesh and blood splatter on the battlefield for the first time. But the last time she fought with Muzi, her reaction wasn't as intense as this. After thinking about it, Xiao Ju finally frowned. He softened his voice and comforted her. It's okay now. Don't cry. He looked around and saw that the Yuchuo soldiers were only left with remnants of their last struggle. Cui Yueji's men had already arrived, so the rest were nothing to be afraid of. Commander-in-Chief, Slave Fei rushed over and looked at He Yin. He was also stunned for a moment. How long are you going to stand here and cry? Xiao Ju felt a headache coming on. He Yin quickly wiped away her tears. She knew that she had lost her composure. Even though the situation was already decided, this wasn't the time to be sad. She turned around and said, Sand got into my eyes just now. It's okay now. Let's wrap it up. Her voice still sounded like she was crying. This excuse was so lame that it felt perfunctory. Xiao Ju couldn't be bothered to expose her. When she turned around and walked back with her sword, he suddenly grabbed He Yin's arm. What's wrong? He Yin looked back in confusion. Xiao Ju didn't say anything and only looked behind her. He Yin followed his gaze and saw a few drops of blood slowly flowing down from her waist into the river, leaving only a trail of blood. She was stunned and reached out to touch her back. The pain that had been dull for a long time seemed to have returned. She had probably charged into the Yuchuo soldiers in anger and only attacked without defending. The Yudo had taken advantage of the opening and injured her. Later, she had been in a hurry to find Xiao Ju and didn't realize that she had been injured. The armor was heavy, so it wasn't obvious that she was injured. If not for the blood dripping down, it would have been hard to notice. He Yin felt the pain, but it wasn't unbearable. It wasn't like he hadn't suffered injuries more painful than this in the past, so he didn't feel anything. Instead, he adjusted his armor and said indifferently, I might have been cut. I'll go back and bandage it. Go back to Linshuanga now, Xiao Ju said. We don't need you here. Yudo's momentum was gone, and Maka was dead. Thousands of ships were burning on the river, and Cui Yueji and the remaining soldiers of Jiang City were more than enough to deal with the remaining soldiers. However, He Yin didn't have the habit of letting his subordinates work while he himself rested, so he said, No need. It's just some minor injuries. Xiao Ju frowned and looked at her coldly. There's really no need. He Yin tried to break free of his hand, but Xiao Ju was too strong and couldn't break free. The young man in the dark armor looked down at her. His posture was tall, and his cold eyes seemed to contain knives. However, his tone was light. You don't know pain? You don't feel pain, so you don't know how to shout in pain? He insisted that he seemed to be angry. She instinctively replied, It doesn't hurt. A hint of disdain flashed through the young man's eyes. He looked calmly at her and said, Do you not feel pain? Or do you not dare to feel pain? Do you think it's not necessary? Or do you not need it? After saying this, he released his hand and turned to leave. He didn't look back at He Yin. What kind of temper is this? He Yin stood in place, and after a while, he muttered in a low voice, No one has taught me, and no one has coaxed me. She followed him. The war ended much earlier than expected. It took 2 days for the Yudo's ships to enter the canal, for the wind and fire to attack, and for the remaining soldiers to be cleaned up. It didn't even take 3 days. Of course, the bravery of Jiang City soldiers and the ingenuity of Xiao Ju's command and formation played a part in this. However, the most important factor was the east wind. If the wind had blown a little later or a little shorter, the result wouldn't have been like this. The fire from the east wind didn't stop and buried thousands of Yudo's ships in the canal outside Jiang City. Countless citizens of Jiang City knelt down and kowtowed in the direction of the canal. Tears flowed down their faces. Thank you, Water Goddess, for your protection. Thank you, General Feng Yun. for commanding the troops like a god. Thank you, God, for protecting Jiang. God, for protecting Dawei. The morning glow dyed the surface of the river and dyed the blood-soaked river a golden red. It was unknown whether it was the blood of the martyrs or the morning glow. It was so magnificent that it was shocking. The remaining Jiang City soldiers on the shore took off their armor and sat on the ground. They stared blankly in the direction of the sunrise. Their blood-stained faces were filled with relief. Jiang City was defended. In the Chui residence, He Yin sat on the couch and watched Lin Shuanghe brew medicine for her. "Brother Lin, leave this to Chui Jiao," He Yin said. "There's no need to trouble you." Lin Shuanghe sat by the stove and fanned himself. "What does this little girl know? My medicine can't be brewed by ordinary people. I have to do it myself. I say, little sister, you too. Don't you know that there's such a big wound on your body? No wonder why Jean is so angry. If you die here, people will blame themselves. It's not a big wound." He Yin felt that this person was exaggerating. It's only the length of a palm. It didn't hurt any vital parts. In a real battle, this was considered a minor injury. There was once when she was hit by an arrow in her shoulder. She had to continue fighting, but the doctors around her couldn't take care of her. She could only pull out the arrow with her bare hands and continue fighting with the arrow embedded in her skin. Later, when the military doctor came to see her, He Yin's entire sleeve was dyed red with blood. The wound was stuck to the cloth and could not be pulled apart. As long as she could still walk and fight, it was considered a minor injury as long as it did not harm her life. "Little sister, when will you remember that you're a girl? When I was treating other young ladies in Shuo capital, they would sometimes kill themselves just because of a birthmark the size of a fingernail. If you send this wound over, people will be able to see it." He lifted the lid of the medicine pot to take a look. The medicine was boiling in the pot and bubbling. Lin Shuanghe put the lid down again. He held the pot with a handkerchief and placed it on the table beside him. "Let's not talk about whether your life is in danger or whether you can endure pain. But don't you like to be beautiful?" He took a clean medicine bowl from the side and poured the medicine in the pot into it. "Aren't you afraid that your future husband will dislike you? Don't blame me for saying this, but it's normal for a girl to pay attention to this." He Yin leaned against the couch and looked at his actions. She smiled and said, "I don't plan on getting married." "Why?" Lin Shuanghe paused and looked at her. "You're young and not bad. Your personality can be considered straightforward and cute. Since you don't have any difficult illnesses, why don't you plan on getting married? Getting married is boring." He Yin sighed. "It's just a house. Walking around in the same place, it's just the same place. It's better to live in the military camp. Your way of thinking is quite strange." Lin Shuanghe put the medicine aside to dry. "When you meet someone you like in the future, you won't think this way. Even if I meet someone I like, I still won't get married," He Yin said. Lin Shuanghe narrowed his eyes. "Younger sister don't tell me you already have someone you like?" "No." Although she answered straightforwardly, Lin Shuanghe suddenly felt suspicious. He Yin was perfectly fine, so why would she say such depressing words? Based on his many years of experience with women, for a girl to say something like, "I don't want to get married," at such a young age, it was most likely that she had been hurt by love. He Yin had always been in the Liang province guards, practicing with swords and rods all day long. Where did this hurt from love come from? His heart trembled. Could it be that she had really fallen in love with Chu Xilan? And because of Chu Xilan's identity and his relationship with Su Pingting, she knew that she couldn't marry Chu Xilan. Was that why her heart was like dead ashes? But if that was the case, what about Xiao Ju? For a moment, Lin Shuanghe felt that all kinds of situations were very serious. Seeing him in a daze, He Yin asked again, "Brother Lin, have you seen my master?" From the beginning of the war to the end of the war, when everyone began to clean up the mess, He Yin didn't see Lu Buwang. Lin Shuanghe said, "That morning, Master Lu left with Cui Zhongqi. Cui Zhongqi was busy taking care of the wounded soldiers and hadn't come back yet. Master Lu should be with him." He Yin nodded, but he felt a little uneasy. Lin Shuanghe walked to He Yin again, took out a round box from his sleeve, and put it beside He Yin's pillow. "This is our family's secret scar removal ointment. Use it on your body. I don't dare to say that you'll recover completely, but it's still possible to recover most of your scars. Hien's body had already been bandaged by a female doctor in Jiang City. At this moment, he picked it up and looked at it. He saw that the words scar removal and muscle growth were written on the round box, which looked particularly familiar. Thinking back carefully, he remembered that when he went to Liangzhou City with Xiao Ju, he was injured in a fight with Ding Yi at night. Later, when he returned to the Liangzhou City guards, Shenmu Xue also put such a box on the medicine tray when he brought her medicine. At that time, Hien used it, and it really had an excellent scar removal effect. His scars were now very light. At that time, she was very grateful to Shenmu Xue for being so careful and praised the magic of the ointment. Unfortunately, the box was very small, and there wasn't much medicine, so it was gone after she used it. "Is this your family's secret ointment?" Hien asked. Lin Shuanghe was a little proud. "To be precise, it's my secret ointment." "Is it very expensive?" "Little sister He, how can you use money to measure the value of medicine? I'm not selling this medicine. If I really did sell it, the people in Shuajing City would be able to live comfortably for several lifetimes with this medicine. Money is like floating clouds to me. I specially made this medicine for Huaijin. He gets injured easily every day, and when Xiao Ruby sees him later, her heart will ache. If I add some scar removal ointment, Xiao Ruby won't be able to tell, and she'll feel better. So that her big brother won't worry?" Hien thought to himself, Xiao Ju is quite cautious, but she clearly remembered that Shenmu Xue was the one who gave it to her. Hien asked Lin Shuanghe, "Have you never made this medicine for other people, like other girls?" "What do you mean?" Lin Shuanghe said curiously. "If this medicine really gets out, not only me, but even my father and grandfather will be annoyed to death. I won't tell anyone else. I only made it for Huaijin. I didn't make much, only a few boxes. I only gave you one box because you and I are close. Don't tell anyone else. This medicine is hard to make, and I still want to live for a few more years." Hien, "Okay. Then take your time to drink the medicine. Rest after you've finished." Lin Shuanghe waved his fan in satisfaction. "I'll go out and ask if there's anything else I can help with." Lin Shuanghe left, and Hien looked at the medicine box in her hand. The medicine box was exquisite, and she held it in her palm. Xiao Ju gave it to her. The wounded soldiers were all settled down, and the dead soldiers were all recorded in a book. There weren't many soldiers in Jiang City to begin with, and after this battle, there weren't many left. Cui Yuezhi led the soldiers behind him to clean up the battlefield. He also had many injuries on his body. His face was covered in blood, and there was a wound on his head that was wrapped up with a white cloth. When he saw Xiao Ju coming from afar, Cui Yuezhi hurriedly went to greet him. "Military Governor Xiao." Xiao Ju was much younger than him, but he didn't dare to underestimate him anymore. If not for Xiao Ju, Jiang City would not have been able to defend itself against the 150,000 Yuchuo soldiers. Luck played a part in their narrow victory, but more importantly, it was because of this lucky general. In Hien's words, he was a famous general. He didn't lose when he shouldn't have, and he could win when he couldn't. No matter how bad the chess game was, he could turn defeat into victory. Of course, Missy was also very powerful. However, he heard that she was injured and was sent back to her residence to rest. "The battlefield has already been cleaned up," Cui Yuezhi said. "Once the Yuchuo soldiers have finished counting their casualties, we can return to the prince's residence and report the situation to His Highness. His Highness will write a report about this battle and report it to the imperial court. None of the people in Jiang City dare to forget the life-saving grace of the commander-in-chief." Xiao Ju walked forward. "No need to thank them." "Thank them." Cui Yuezhi was a little emotional. Probably because they had fought side by side before, he also felt a bit of genuine affection for Xiao Ju. Just as he was about to speak, someone suddenly came over. It was Cui Yuezhi's subordinate. Cui Yuezhi's subordinate glanced at Xiao Ju with a hesitant expression. "What's the matter?" Cui Yuezhi asked. "Sir, we found Mr. Lu." Lu Buwang hadn't been with them since the start of the battle. Cui Yuezhi was worried. Hearing this, he asked anxiously, "Where is he?" on the forest bank in front of the mouth of the calabash. The subordinate said, "Mr. Liu." Chui Yuezhi's heart gradually sank. He looked at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju lowered his eyes. After a while, he said calmly, "Lead the way." Lu Buwang died in the center of the tactical deployment. He died very miserably. His body was covered with wounds. The most fatal wound was a knife wound on his chest, which ran through his heart from the back to the front. Before he died, the corners of his mouth were still curled up without any resentment. He was very calm, as if he had seen something very beautiful. In addition, there were many Yudo who had died under his sword around him. There were also corpses in the depths of the dense forest. Chui Yuezhi looked at them for a long time and asked hesitantly, "Is it Chiman Dunjia?" Xiao Ju said, "Yes." Chui Yuezhi was in awe. Nowadays, there are not many people who knew Chiman Dunjia. Lu Buwang set up the tactical deployment here and killed many Yudo, which bought them a lot of time. If it weren't for Lu Buwang, those Yudo would have entered the city and started a killing spree. The consequences would have been unimaginable. Lu Buwang didn't tell anyone that he had been blocking in front for so long that no one knew that he had died. His sword fell beside him, his zither was smashed into pieces, and his white clothes were stained with blood. Chui Yuezhi looked at Xiao Ju worriedly. He only knew that Lu Buwang was Xiao Ju's master. Now that Lu Buwang was dead, Xiao Ju must be very sad. Xiao Ju squatted down and slowly tidied up Lu Buwang's clothes, which had been messed up by the Yudo. Then she took out a handkerchief from her arms and wiped the blood off his face. After doing all this, she looked at Lu Buwang's face and said in a low voice, "Take him back." He then stayed in the Chui mansion until the evening. Chui Yuezhi's 4 concubines took turns to visit her and brought her all kinds of food. Even though Yen liked sweets, she couldn't eat so many sweets. After she finally sent the concubines away, someone came to report, "Master is back. The commander-in-chief is back." Yen was refreshed. She got out of bed, put on her shoes, and walked out. Chui Yuezhi and Xiao Ju were back. Maybe Lu Buwang was back too. As soon as Chui Yuezhi walked to the door, she was surrounded by the 4 concubines, especially the 3rd concubine. She hugged Chui Yuezhi and cried her heart out. She was really good at crying. Ian was thinking in his heart when he saw a person walking past Chui Yuezhi and coming towards him. It was Xiao Ju. She hadn't had time to take off her armor and was travel-worn. Ian didn't feel disgusted. He thought in his heart, sure enough, a person with extraordinary appearance can't hide her beauty even if she is covered in dust. Xiao Ju walked up to her and frowned slightly. "Who let you come out? It's not a big deal." Ian clapped her hands. "Even Brother Lin thinks that you are making a fuss over a minor issue. By the way, Commander-in-Chief, have you seen my master? I asked around, but no one has seen him. At this time, he should be back." Hearing this, Xiao Ju's eyes moved and fell on her face. A trace of pity flashed through those cold black eyes. It was like a silent sigh that fell on people's hearts. Hian's smile slowly disappeared. She asked, "Is something wrong?" Xiao Ju said, "Go and see him." Hian's entire body froze. Lu Buwang was sleeping on the couch in the room. His clothes had been changed. Except for his pale face, he looked like he was asleep. It was as if as long as she called him, he would sit up, look at her with a smile, and call her a he. Hian's eyes suddenly turned red. She almost couldn't stand steadily. She walked to Lu Buwang's side and held his hand. His hand was very cold, not as warm as when he pulled her up from the pile of corpses. He used to be a light sleeper and would wake up as long as there was a slight movement. Now she called a master here, but he was unmoved. Hian's hand touched his shoulder. After a pause, she gently pulled down Lu Buwang's clothes. His clothes had been changed, so it was obvious that he was injured. But Hian didn't expect that there would be so many wounds. Those Yudo suffered a big loss in Lu Buwang's hands, so they naturally wanted to pay him back 100 times. When Lu Buwang's physical strength was exhausted, he rushed to make another cut on the spoils of war. His body was broken into pieces. However, his expression was so calm, as if he had just fallen asleep under the flower tree and had a beautiful dream. Hian's gaze fell on Lu Buwang's hand, which was clenched into a fist very tightly. Tian was silent for a moment. Then she used a little strength to pry open his fingers and saw what he was hiding in his palm. It was a silver bracelet. It looked very rough and seemed to be an old thing from many years ago. It was probably played with and treasured every day. Some carvings had been smoothed out and were not very obvious, but she could still see a small wild daisy carved on the edge of the bracelet. This was what Lu Buwang wanted to protect at the end of his life. He had no children and only took her as his disciple. At the end of his life, except for a zither, a sword, and this silver bracelet, he left nothing. Empty and vast, clean and tidy. Tian's throat was choked with sobs, and she couldn't speak. They had reunited after a long time, but they were going to be separated forever before they could say a few words. She desperately held back her tears, and a handkerchief was placed in front of her. "If you want to cry, just cry." Xiao Ju said, "I'll be outside. No one will come in." His voice was very soft and light, with a little imperceptible comfort. Before Yin could speak, he turned and went out. The door was closed behind him. A girl's cry came from behind the door. At first, it was a suppressed sob. Then, as if she couldn't suppress it, the cry became louder and louder. In the end, she wailed like a child who couldn't get candy. The crying reached the ears of Concubine Wei in the next room. She stood up and twisted her handkerchief uneasily. "Should I go and take a look?" "Don't." Second Concubine shook her head and looked out of the window. The young man stood in front of the door with his hands behind his back, like a guardian guarding the fragile, precious thing. When I can't comfort her at such a sad time, let them solve it themselves." The wailing in the room stopped at some point. After a long time, the door opened with a creak, and someone walked out from inside. Xiao Ju looked sideways. The girl's tears had been wiped clean. Except for her red eyes, there was nothing wrong with her. Her expression was calm, and even a little deliberately relaxed. "Commander-in-Chief, thank you for guarding the door from me," she said. Xiao Ju frowned and looked at her. Tian looked back. "Why are you looking at me? Is there something on my face?" "It's ugly." "What?" "You look ugly when you lie." His black eyes were glittering, and his words were as cold as ice. With a kind of insight, he said in a deep voice, "I've said it before. You can cry when you want to cry, and you can smile when you don't want to. It's better than your pretentious look now. It's extremely ugly." His words were really not pleasant to hear. Tian was stunned for a moment, and then she smiled. She said, "I'm not pretending. It's just, that's all I can do." Lu Buwang was dead. This was a fact that couldn't be changed. She could be sad for Lu Buwang's death, but she had to look forward. People couldn't tell everyone their pain and sadness. This would only make people hate them. Some painful things should be kept in the heart. If she always cried to others, over time, others would hate her, and she wouldn't be able to get over it. She used the experience of 2 lifetimes to tell herself that no matter how difficult things were, they would pass. But do you know? She sighed. "There are not many people in this world who are good to me. I can count them with one hand. Now, there is one less." Chapter 160. Lu Buwang's body had just been brought back, and they hadn't had time to discuss the burial yet. Someone came to inform Xiao Ju that the people sent by Her Highness had found Chai Anchi. Xiao Ju immediately rushed to the mansion with Lin Shuanghe. When they arrived at the hall of the mansion, Mu Hongjin was talking to her subordinates. When she saw Xiao Ju, she shook her head slightly and said, "He's dying." When the two entered the room, they saw a person lying on the couch. This person had been shot in the heart by an arrow, and blood kept flowing out. A person who looked like a doctor was pressing the wound for him. Lin Shuanghe asked the person to leave. He sat on the edge of the couch, felt his pulse, and shook his head at Xiao Ju. There's no hope. He was just a doctor after all. Fighting for his life with the king of hell also depended on luck. It was impossible to save him with such injuries. Lin Shuanghe took out a medicine bottle from his bosom, poured out a pill from it, and fed it to Chai Anchi. Not long after, the person on the couch struggled to open his eyes. Lin Shuanghe got up. "There's not much time. If you have any questions, ask them as soon as possible." He patted Xiao Ju's shoulder and went out. Chai Anchi raised his head in a daze. When he saw Xiao Ju's face, His dim eyes suddenly lit up. He gasped, "Second young master?" Xiao Ju stared at him indifferently. "Second young master." Chai Anchi was a little excited, but as soon as he spoke, he spat out a big mouthful of blood. He asked, "Why are you here?" "I'm here to find you." Xiao Ju sat down on the chair in front of the couch and said calmly, "It's been 5 years. Now I should know what happened in the Battle of Mingshui." Chai Anchi was stunned and didn't speak for a long time. Xiao Ju actually often saw Chai Anchi when he was young. Chai Anchi was Xiao Zhongwu's assistant soldier. His martial arts skills were not the best, but his temperament was the most loyal and honest. He was like a black bear, and his build was similar to Shen Han's. When he was young, Chai Anchi would occasionally work for Xiao Zhongwu in the Fu. When he saw Xiao Ju, he would always smile and call him second young master. However, the Chai Anchi lying on the bed right now was completely different from the Xiao Ju in his memory. Chai Anchi was about the same age as Xiao Zhongwu and was in the prime of his life, but he looked like an old man. His hair had turned white, and there was a burn mark on his face. He didn't know if his body had shriveled or something, but he had become extremely small, like a child who hadn't grown up yet. The way he looked at Xiao Ju was no longer filled with love. Instead, it was filled with regret, guilt, pain, or something else. It was so complicated that it was frightening. He smiled bitterly and said, "Second young master, you already know, right?" Xiao Ju did not say anything. General was killed by someone, and that person included me. Xiao Ju suddenly looked up, his fingers clenched into fists under his sleeves. "You also know," Chai Anchi spoke with difficulty, "General was always unhappy that Prime Minister Su had too much power, but His Majesty always trusted Prime Minister Su. General reminded His Majesty to be wary of Prime Minister Su, and Prime Minister Su had long hated General. The current Crown Prince was tyrannical and cowardly. He and Prime Minister Su were jackals of the same tribe. They didn't like General for a long time, and the two of them were afraid of General's military power. They wanted to frame General, but General's life was clean, and they couldn't find any loopholes. Crown Prince and Prime Minister Su worked together and secretly planned the Battle of Mingshui with the Southern barbarians. During the Battle of Mingshui, there was a traitor in the Southern Fu army. General was attacked from both sides and died. Xiao Ju looked at him, mockery flashing through her limpid eyes. "Are you the traitor?" Chai Anchi's expression became pained. "I'm sorry, second young master. I'm sorry. They used my mother to threaten me. My mother was already 70 years old. I promised them and gave them a copy of General's deployment map. I wasn't the only one. At that time, there were other people in General's Southern Fu army who betrayed him. They used my wife and children to threaten me. At that time, I was blinded and I agreed. Why did you go to Jiang later?" "Prime Minister Su. How could Prime Minister Su allow someone who knew the truth to live in this world? At that time, the few who betrayed him were later killed in the Battle of Mingshui. I was lucky enough to escape. I wanted to go back and take my mother with me, but when I got home, my mother had already died of illness. Prime Minister Su's people were looking for me everywhere. I once heard from General that Jiang City was easy to get out but hard to get in. It was the easiest place to hide, so I used some methods to conceal my identity and hid in Jiang. Second young master, all these years, I've always wanted to stand up and explain what happened back then. However, even though I was in Jiang, the news I heard was that Prime Minister Su's power was getting stronger and stronger. Even if I stood up and said something, the people at that time were all dead. Without evidence, no one would believe me. I wanted to go and find you, but as soon as I left Jiang City, news of me would spread. Prime Minister Su wouldn't let me live to see you, so I could only wait. I knew that if second young master was still alive, you would find me one day." Tears gradually seeped out from the corners of his eyes. "You found me. That's great. Second young master, you've grown up. If General was still here, he would be very happy to see you like this." Looking at his tears, Xiao Ju's expression did not change in the slightest. She only asked, "Who killed you?" I don't know," Chai Anchi said blankly. "As early as 20 days ago, When I was in Sui Pavilion, someone wanted to kill me. They set a big fire at night, but I escaped. The wound on my face was left at that time. After that, I hid until Yudo came to Jiang. I heard about Second Young Master's news and wanted to find you, but I was chased halfway. He was no longer the strong man under Xiao Zhongwu. After so many years, his age and skills could not be compared to back then. Because of that big fire, he was easily ambushed and killed because of his old injuries. He was still alive. If he could live to see Xiao Ju, he could see how the young man looked like when he grew up, and he could tell her the guilt and regret in his heart. I don't have anything to help you with, Second Young Master. I'm just saying this for peace of mind. I owe the General, Madam, First Young Master, Second Young Master, and my brothers. I can't repay them all in this lifetime. He seemed to be crying and laughing at the same time. When I go to hell, I will personally kowtow to the General and apologize. His voice stopped abruptly. His eyes were still open, but there was no light in them anymore. He was dead. Xiao Ju sat quietly with her eyes lowered. After a while, she stood up and walked out of the room. Chai Anchi was dead. The last person who knew about the Battle of Mingshui was gone. He could not bring a dead person back to Shuo Jing as a witness, and Chai Anchi did not leave behind anything that could be used as evidence. Coming here was just to confirm some of the things that he had guessed from the beginning. Mu Hongjin and Lin Shuanghe were waiting for him outside. When they saw Xiao Ju come out, Mu Hongjin said, "When Yudo came, the situation was complicated. I could not send people to find him. After the incident, someone found Chai Anchi's whereabouts. When my men found him, he was being chased. When he was rescued, he was already seriously injured. I asked the doctor in the city to stop the bleeding temporarily." Mu Hongjin looked at Xiao Ju's expression and frowned slightly. "Is he dead?" "Xiao Ju, he's dead." She sighed and did not say anything. After searching for so long, they finally found him, but he was dead. It was such a pity that he was so close. Lin Shuanghe asked, "Huaijin, what do you plan to do after this?" Xiao Ju was silent for a while, then said, "Chai Anchi is dead. The war in Jiang is over. We will leave for Liangzhou in a few days." "Are you leaving?" Mu Hongjin was a little reluctant. "You didn't stay here for long. Why don't you wait for Xiao Lu to come back?" Xiao Ju said, "I have other things to do." Mu Hongjin did not ask him to stay. She smiled and said, "No matter what, Jiang City was saved because of military Governor Xiao. I will write a memorial to the Emperor. His Majesty will definitely reward you." "No need." Xiao Ju turned and walked away. He seemed to be uninterested in these things and was a little impatient. Lin Shuanghe scratched his head and explained, "Huaijin is in a bad mood now. Your Highness, please don't lower yourself to his level." Mu Hongjin shook her head. Since he was the hero of Jiang City, she was grateful no matter what. "All right." Xiao Ju seemed to have thought of something and stopped walking. He did not turn around and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, do you know that Mr. Liu is no longer here?" Mu Hongjin's expression froze. In the Chui residence, Chu Zhao was boiling tea in a small stove. His expression was calm, and his movements were patient. Ying Xiang handed him a handkerchief. He held the teapot by the handle and placed it on the table. "Chai Anchi is probably not going to make it," Ying Xiang said softly. Chai Anchi can be considered a talent to be able to find a place like Jiang and only die after 5 years. Chu Zhao smiled. "But fourth young master," Ying Xiang did not understand. "Why didn't you just kill him? Why did you deliberately keep him alive and let him see military Governor Xiao and tell him the truth? Wouldn't that expose the Prime Minister? Even if he didn't say it, Xiao Huaijin would have already guessed who the mastermind was." Chu Zhao smiled carelessly. Telling him the truth would only make him feel more at ease. Chai Anchi was defeated in front of him, so he would hate the Prime Minister even more. The greater the threat Xiao Huaijin poses to the Prime Minister, the more the Prime Minister will value me. After all, no one knows better than the Prime Minister about checks and balances. Besides, this is Jiang. Since there is no one around, what we do is our own business. He said calmly, "Whether we add fuel to the fire or reduce it, it's all up to us." Ying Xiang nodded. "This servant understands." Then, fourth young master, now that Chai Anshi is dead and we have done what the prime minister asked us to do, are we going back to the Shuo capital? No, Chu Zhao said. There is one thing that I am very curious about, so I've decided to go to the Liangzhou Guard first. The Liangzhou Guard? Ying Xiang was surprised. That is military governor Zhao's territory. Chu Zhao and Xiao Ju had never been on good terms. In the Liangzhou Guard, Chu Zhao would definitely not be able to gain any advantage. So, it will be very interesting to snatch someone from Xiao Huaijin's territory. The tea leaves in the teacup floated up and down. As he looked at them, he slowly chuckled. The return time was set for 2 days later. After Lu Buwang was buried, He Yin, Xiao Ju, and the others set off to return to the Liangzhou Guard. Coming to Jiang this time, there were many happy things, but there were also many sad things. The most regretful thing was that they had to part forever after reuniting with an old friend. He Yin became unusually silent and slowly packed her luggage in the room. Actually, He Yin didn't have many clothes to begin with. Lin Shuanghe had paid for the women's clothes at the embroidery workshop in Jiang for her, so he couldn't bring them back. As a man, if she carried women's clothes with her, she would probably be looked at strangely by others. Therefore, He Yin kept all the clothes, jewelry, and shoes and gave them to Cui Yuezhis for concubines. It was just that when she was packing, she looked at them and felt a little reluctant. It was probably because she had been a woman for too long, so she was really not used to being a man again. There was also a dough figurine under her pillow. The dough figurine was not as colorful as when it was first made. It was a little dim, and the dough was gradually drying up. There were even traces of drying and cracking. He Yin picked it up and looked at it carefully in front of his eyes. During the Water God Festival, Xiao Ju and she were on the Firefly boat on the way to the falling Firefly Spring. They saw a peddler who made dough figurines on the water and made one that looked like her. Her long hair was tied into a small braid in front of her forehead and hung down behind her head. She was wearing a red dress and black boots. Yin Yin smiled and looked like a stranger, but it also looked like her. She knew from the beginning that she couldn't bring this thing back to the Liangzhou Guards after buying it. However, He Yin couldn't bear to leave it here. It was as if wherever the dough figurine existed was where her memories existed. If she left it here, she would be abandoning her memories of Jiang. However, she wasn't willing to give up the sad or happy memories. You don't want to bring it back? Xiao Ju sat in front of the table and glanced at her. He Yin sighed. I'm afraid that the Liangzhou Guards will find out if I bring it back. It won't be good if the cat is out of the bag. Xiao Ju's mouth twitched. Aren't you very good at lying? Why can't you even find an excuse? He Yin thought that everything else was fine, but when it came to hiding her identity from her previous life to this life, she had been very careful. After all, an ant's nest could destroy a 1,000-mile dike. One careless move, and the whole game would be lost. It was better to be careful. It's better to be safe than sorry. As she spoke, she gripped the dough figurine's wooden stick tightly in her hand, unwilling to let go. Xiao Ju sneered. You can say that you're buying it for your fiancé. He Yin was stunned and looked at him. Is that okay? You're not a pure and innocent person. You're so infatuated with your fiancé. Naturally, you'll think of her wherever you go. What's wrong with buying a commemorative dough figurine as a gift? His words reminded He Yin that she was right. She seemed to be someone who had a fiancé. For a moment, he felt that Xiao Ju's reason made a lot of sense. She picked up the dough figurine and put it into her bag. Then, she praised Xiao Ju. Commander-in-Chief, I just realized that you're a real expert at lying. Xiao Ju put down the military book in her hand and looked at her with raised eyebrows. I was just saying, don't take it to heart. He Yin sighed. It's just that I've been in Jiang for too long. I'm a little reluctant to go back to the Liangzhou garrison. It was natural for the simple and honest people to feel sentimental when they came to such a gentle water town. She didn't know if she would have the chance to come here again in this lifetime. Even if she did, she didn't know how many years it would be. Do you want to stay? Xiao Ju asked. He Yin nodded, then shook her head. No, I like it here, but there are more important things to do. If she didn't have the grudges from her previous life and simply used the identity of He Yin, she would naturally be more than happy to be able to stay here for a long time. However, she still had grudges to settle. No matter how beautiful the scenery was, she couldn't stay here. She had to keep moving forward. Are you talking about making contributions? His voice carried a hint of mockery. He smiled. You can say that. However, Commander-in-Chief, you promised me that as long as I follow you to Jiang City, you'll let me join the Southern Prefecture Army. You still keep your promise? Xiao Ju said, I keep my promise. Tian was happy. At least she was a little closer to her goal. Xiao Ju lowered her eyes to hide the deep meaning in her eyes. When she raised her head again, her expression had returned to normal. Just as she was about to speak, someone knocked on the door. It was Cui Jiao's voice. Madam, come in. Cui Jiao walked in with a neatly folded set of clothes in her hands. She first glanced at Xiao Ju with a troubled expression. What's wrong? Ian asked. Fourth young master Chu from next door asked me to return this set of clothes to you. He said that it was thanks to Madam's clothes that he was able to escape unscathed. He is very grateful. Ian remembered that when Chu Zhao had returned Mu Hongjin's clothes for her, Ian had given him the mermaid dress that was invulnerable to swords and spears and impervious to fire and water. He had asked him to wear it as armor. If he hadn't asked Cui Jiao to return it, Ian would have forgotten about it. Ian took the mermaid dress and thought for a moment before putting it on the table. She was also a girl when she returned to the Liangzhou guards. She had no use for this dress. It would be better to leave it for Cui Yuezhi's concubines. As soon as he put it down, he met Xiao Ju's cold eyes. The young man tilted his head to look at her and calmly said, You gave the clothes I bought to Chu Xilan. You didn't buy it, Ian said honestly. Didn't Brother Lin pay for it? Xiao Ju's expression was indifferent. Ian realized that this person was angry. Thinking about it, he and Chu Xilan were sworn enemies. Yet, she had given Chu Xilan something that he had chosen. Naturally, he would be unhappy. She thought for a moment and took the initiative to explain. At that time, I asked Cui Jiao to give me the clothes for Her Highness. Brother Chu was afraid that something would happen to Cui Jiao, a young girl, so he came to give it to her himself. I saw that he was a big man who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. If he met a Yudo by the side of the canal, he would be killed in 2 slashes. Didn't the shop assistant at the embroidery workshop say that this dress is invulnerable to swords and spears and impervious to fire and water? I have armor, so I gave this dress to him as armor. Tian had forgotten that this dress was for women. If she gave it to Chu Xilan probably wouldn't wear it. Brother Chu? Xiao Ju slowly asked. Ian took a step back. He knew that he had said something wrong again. Fourth young Master Chu. Fourth young Master Chu. He sneered. I see that you and Chu Xilan are very close. No, we're not very close. Ian said seriously. We just met by chance. We won't see each other again in the future. Let me remind you again. The young man's eyebrows were slightly impatient. His voice was cold. You can like anyone, but if you like Chu Xilan, you're courting death. Chapter 161. 2 days later, Lu Buwang was buried. According to the customs of Jiang, after a person passed away, they would be sent to the coffin on the wooden boat and buried in the water. The wooden boat was also called the boat that carried souls. Because Jiang was close to the water, the people of Jiang believed that the water goddess would use a boat to carry a person's soul to the other side. Tian went to send Lu Buwang off for the last time. Lu Buwang lay in the wooden coffin with a very calm expression. It was unknown what he thought of before he died, but the corners of his mouth were also smiling. Tian put a handful of flowers in her hand on the wooden boat. Her master-disciple relationship with Lu Buwang was actually very short. It was Lu Buwang who pulled her out of the pile of corpses and taught her how to use knives, arrows, bows, and horses. Tian's Chimanduanjia was combined with the military books that Yin had learned, which changed his life from then on. If Lu Buwang hadn't stretched out his hand to her back then, she would probably have died in the desert of Mo County. After being reborn and meeting Lu Buwang again, she originally thought that it was a gift from the heavens. However, This fate was like a flash in the pan and disappeared very quickly. Hien hated herself for not talking more with Lu Buwang. Now, she had many regrets. She didn't have time to ask Lu Buwang what happened between him and Mu Hongjin back then, nor did she have time to ask him where he had been all these years. She also didn't have the chance to confide in Lu Buwang about her worries and uncertainties. In her life, she didn't seem to have a good relationship with her elders. Her fate with her parents and relatives was even fainter. Lu Buwang was both her master and father. Now, he had also left. There were always more regrets in the world than satisfactions. "Your Highness," Hien heard Cui Yuezhi behind her speak. She turned around and saw Mu Hongjin walking over. She didn't wear the red robe, but a black one. Her long hair was braided and tied up, and she wore a golden crown on her head. She was still as beautiful and powerful as before, but there was a trace of confusion in her expression. It made her look like a child who had lost her way and was the first to be vulnerable. Hien stepped aside, and Mu Hongjin walked up to the front of the wooden boat. The burial objects of the man on the ship were only a sword and a zither, both of which would be left in the wooden coffin. When he left the mountain, he was just as handsome as he was, and when he left the mortal world, he was still untainted. Even though the white-clothed youth was old, he seemed to still be a youth. Mu Hongjin stared blankly. When Xiao Ju said that Lu Buwang wasn't here, she found it unbelievable at first, and then she found it ridiculous. Then, she was struck by a huge sense of loss, which made it hard for her to believe that this had happened. But what happened was what happened. Many things could not be changed by one's will. She was no longer an ignorant little girl. All she had to do was bury her head in the pillow and lie to herself that she didn't believe it. That was why she had come. Lu Buwang died in order to protect Jiang City. Before he died, he set up a formation on the riverbank in front of the mouth of the calabash. He fought against hundreds and thousands of people alone, but he didn't tell anyone. As usual, he refused to say anything. This was the only man she had ever loved in her life. Even though Lu Buwang had someone else in his heart, and they had broken up for many years, a concern was still a concern. Mu Hongjin would still be sad if he died. "Your Highness." Hien thought for a while, walked forward, and spread out his palm. "Do you recognize this?" Mu Hongjin slowly turned her head and saw a silver bracelet lying in Hien's hand. The bracelet was polished until it was smooth and warm, and a circle of tiny daisies could be faintly seen on the edge. In an instant, the images of the past filled her mind, and she seemed to hear the kind voice of an old woman falling into her ears. "This is called a happy bracelet. Buy one and wear on your sweetheart's hand. You won't be separated from her for the rest of your life. Young hero Lu, did you hear that? Quickly buy one for me. She's not my sweetheart." Mu Hongjin stared blankly at the bracelet in front of her, as if she was looking at a late gift. She only felt her throat tighten, and she asked in a hoarse voice, "Why do you have this?" Before Master died, he had been holding this bracelet tightly in his hand. I think this should be very important to him. Hien looked at Mu Hongjin. "Is this the bracelet of your Highness?" Mu Hongjin took the bracelet from Hien's hand and murmured, "I don't know." How could she know? Those jokes from back then had long fallen into the depths of her memory, and she didn't even dare to recall them. She had already confronted Lu Buwang that he didn't like her, but now this bracelet clearly told her that she had once been in Lu Buwang's heart. How could she believe it? How could she believe it? A wave of powerless sorrow also surfaced in Hien's heart. Lu Buwang had already left, and no one knew what happened back then, but she still wanted to defend Lu Buwang. "Your Highness, I always feel that there may have been many misunderstandings between you and Master back then," Hien said. "It's just that he's no longer here. If your Highness recognizes this bracelet, your Highness, please take care of it for me. If your Highness feels embarrassed, please put it back into the wooden coffin." "But I think," Hien said softly, "if Master is still here, he will want you to keep it." A gift that he didn't give, a belated explanation, and a frank confession were probably the most regretful things in his life. But what was the use of regretting? When a person died, all the grievances related to him, whether he was willing or not, had disappeared. The story ended here. Mu Hongjin looked at the silver bracelet in her palm. After a while, she slowly clenched her palm and whispered, "I see." Ian saw that she was going to put away the bracelet, and he was slightly relieved. There was really not much she could do for Lu Buwang, and now this was the only thing she could do. The wooden coffin was closed, and all kinds of wildflowers were piled up around the boat. Lu Buwang had gone down the mountain in spring, and now he was going back to spring again. The clear river water pushed the boat forward, farther and farther, and gradually disappeared in the green waves between the mountains. What exactly is Permitha? Ian murmured in a low voice. But who would know? Just like when Lu Buwang went down the mountain and met Mu Hongjin, he sneered at the words "a lifetime" that the woman selling flowers said. Back then, he only felt that his life was long, but it turned out that he had only met a few people, listened to a few songs, met a few times, and parted a few times. A lifetime passed quickly. After Lu Buwang's funeral, He Yin and the others were about to set off for the Liangzhou guards. Chui Yuezhi came to see them off. He stood at the door of the Chui mansion and instructed people to keep moving things into the carriage. These are all specialties of Jiang. Take more back. Liangzhou doesn't have these things. Lin Shuanghe supported his head with a fan and said, "There's no need to bring the roasted rabbit. It's greasy and inconvenient in the carriage." "Bring it," Chui Yuezhi insisted. "Take it and eat it on the way." "Zhong Fu," he called the butler over. "Are the apricots ready?" "Yes." Zhong Fu came over with a cloth bag of red apricots. "They've all been washed clean. Governor and Miss, if you're thirsty, eat 2 apricots. They're thirsty and delicious." Yin, those who didn't know would think that they were going for an outing. It was really difficult to refuse such kindness. "It's really enough, Lord Shui," Yin said with a smile. "If you pack more things, the governor and I won't have a place to sit." Chui Yuezhi looked at the full carriage and finally stopped. He smiled and said, "All right, then forget it. You stayed at my Chui mansion for 2 short time. If you stay longer, I'll definitely take you around the entire Jiang city." At this point, he solemnly bowed to Xiao Ju and Yin. "It's all thanks to Military Governor Xiao, Miss He, and Master Lu that the disaster in Jiang City was resolved. I will never forget this great kindness. The people of Jiang will also remember your kindness. In this life, if there's anything that Jiang City, and I will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation. Miss He, if you have the chance in the future, you must come visit Jiang City more often." The person who spoke was Chui Yuezhi's 4th concubine. She smiled and said, "Next time, stay longer. We'll make delicious food for you." 2nd concubine looked at Xiao Ju and said with a smile, "Military Governor Xiao as well." Concubine Wei glared at the 2 of them. She stepped forward and held He Yan's hand. She reminded him, "Be careful on the road." He Yan smiled and nodded. As they were talking, someone came in from outside. "Lord Lieutenant, Mu Yi has brought people over. He said that he wants to say goodbye to Miss He." Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows. He Yan asked, "Say goodbye to me?" The people that Mu Yi brought were the 50 people who had planned to set fire to the Yuchuo soldiers' ships with He Yan. Among the 50 people, 20 or so had died in the war. However, at least half of them had survived. At this moment, the remaining 20 or so people heard that He Yan was leaving. They followed Mu Yi to thank He Yan. "It's all thanks to Miss He." One of the young men scratched his head. "Otherwise, we might not be alive right now. Before Miss He leaves, we decided to come together to thank Miss He." Mu Yi took out a wooden frame and handed it to He Yan. "This is a gift from everyone to Miss He." He Yan took it and looked at it. It was a wooden drawing carved out of a whole piece of wood. It depicted a sea of fire. A young woman in armor stood at the bow of the ship. The woman held a long whip in her hand. Her long hair was tied up high behind her head. She looked valiant and formidable. It was very eye-catching. Ian looked at it for a long time. He asked hesitantly, "This is me?" "Yes." Another person said, "We pooled some money together and found the best craftsman in Jiang City to carve it out. However, we still couldn't carve out Missy's charm. When Missy used her whip to sink the Wudong warship, it was so exciting. It was much better than the carving in this drawing." "That's right. This drawing can also carve out Miss He's appearance. It's not as beautiful as Miss He herself. That's right. Miss He is so beautiful that even the gods can't draw her. At the end of the speech, all of them were serious praises, which made He Yin blush. Well, she could feel the enthusiasm of the men in Jiang City. Chui Yuezhi looked in front of him with a smile. Mu Yi looked at He Yin and said, "Does Missy have to go back to Liangzhou?" He Yin was stunned for a moment. He nodded and answered, "I still have important matters to attend to." "I see." A trace of regret flashed through the young man's eyes. However, after a moment, he stared into He Yan's eyes and asked seriously, "Then will you come back to Jiang City in the future?" Mu Yi was handsome and masculine. When his sincere and slightly shy gaze landed on someone, it was really irresistible. Even though He Yin was slow to realize it, when faced with such a gaze, she understood a little. She was a little embarrassed, but also very touched. No one could remain indifferent when faced with sincere feelings. It was a very honorable thing to be liked and admired by others. "I like Jiang City very much." She smiled and looked at Mu Yi. "If there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely come back." Mu Yi was stunned. He scratched his head and smiled foolishly. "Oh." Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and leaned close to Xiao Ju's ear. He said, "I already said that my little sister He's appearance and temperament will definitely be liked. Look, so many people are eyeing her covetously. TSK, TSK, TSK. You have to keep an eye on my little sister, He." Xiao Ju sneered, as if she was incredulous. "What kind of taste is that?" "Of course it's good taste." Lin Shuanghe put away his fan. "You have to know that gold will always shine." While the two were talking, another person walked out of the Fu. This person was dressed in a sky-blue robe. He was thin and gentle. It was Chu Zhao. Beside Chu Zhao, Ying Xiang was carrying a bundle in his hand. "Fourth young Master Chu?" Chui Yuezhi was stunned. Chui Yuezhi had already learned about the relationship between Chu Zhao and Xiao Ju from Mu Hongjin. The two of them were not on good terms and had different standpoints. Mu Hongjin had arranged for them to be in the same place to keep them in check. Speaking of which, they were able to defeat Yudo this time because of the defense map and information that Chu Zhao had sent over. However, Chui Yuezhi was a martial arts practitioner. He already felt some sympathy for Xiao Ju. Later on, he had also fought alongside Xiao Ju. The scales in his heart had already tilted toward Xiao Ju. Hence, he treated Chu Zhao with politeness and unfamiliarity. "Fourth young Master Chu, where are you going?" Chui Yuezhi asked. "I came to Jiang this time because of the Yudo incident. Since this matter is over, it's time to bid farewell to everyone." He smiled slightly. "I didn't tell Master Chui before because I didn't want to trouble Master Chui. These few days, the battlefield near the canal has been cleaned up, so Master Chui must be busy. He makes it sound like he's very understanding and we're putting on airs." Lin Shuanghe leaned closer to Xiao Ju and whispered, "He's too good with words." Chui Yuezhi smiled. "Fourth young Master Chu, you're too polite. You should have told me in advance. No matter how busy I am, I still have time to bid you farewell." Chui Yuezhi looked at Xiao Ju. "Fourth young Master Chu, if you depart today, won't you be able to travel together with Military Governor Xiao? This way, you won't be too lonely." When Xiao Ju heard this, her expression was cold. She didn't even pretend to be happy. Ian thought that Chui Yuezhi's politeness was a little stiff. Chu Zhao probably chose today on purpose so that they could depart together. However, she didn't expect Chu Zhao to hear this and smile. "Yes, our destination is also the Liang Province Guard." "Liang Province Guard?" Ian was surprised. Fourth young Master Chu, why are you going to the Liang Province Guard?" Xiao Ju raised her eyes and looked at him. "I've already written a letter to inform Prime Minister Su of the military situation in Jiang." Chu Zhao smiled. "Before His Majesty's decree is issued, I will remain in the Liang Province Guard. After all, I was present from the beginning to the end of the matter in Jiang." He didn't continue speaking, but everyone understood what he meant. Chui Yuezhi was secretly speechless. The open and covert struggles in the imperial court had already become so intense. No wonder the Yudo had an opportunity to take advantage of them. When Xiao Ju heard this, she was first surprised. Then, she said with a faint smile, "Fourth young master Chu, you can stay in the Liang Province Guard if you want. However, I have the final say in the Liang Province Guard." Chu Zhao responded with a smile. He didn't pay any more attention to Chu Zhao and turned to board the carriage. Ian looked at Chu Zhao with a different gaze. This person seemed to be doing it on purpose. He was doing it on purpose to the point where he didn't even bother to hide it. She bowed to Chu Zhao and said, "Then, Brother Chu, I'll board the carriage first." Without waiting for Chu Zhao to speak, Ian hurriedly boarded the carriage. Chu Zhao's provocation definitely made second young master Xiao unhappy. At this juncture, he couldn't pull the hair off a tiger's head. If he angered Xiao Ju and she wasn't allowed to enter the Southern Prefecture Army, this trip would be in vain. Chu Zhao saw her hurriedly boarding the carriage. Chu Zhao was stunned for a moment before he shook his head and smiled. He bid farewell to Cui Yuezhi and the others one by one before he calmly boarded his own carriage with Ing Xiang. The carriage drove out of the city. Lin Shuanghe lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked out the window. Jiang City had just experienced the Yudo military incident, so it wasn't as lively as before. However, the rivers of various sizes were the same as before, and the boats floated quietly. It wouldn't be long before the city returned to its former lively state. When they came, they just treated it as playing around. Now that they were about to leave, they actually felt a lot of sadness. Lin Shuanghe sighed as he looked at it. Ian was still tightly hugging the wooden carving that Mu, Yi, and the others had given her. She traced the carving with her fingers. The woman in the drawing actually had some of the charm of a female general from her previous life. Xiao Ju saw her actions and mocked. "Now you're not afraid of bringing it back and letting the other Liang Province Guard see it?" Previously, she had been extremely troubled by the masked man. Now, with such a large wooden carving, she felt as if she had received a treasure. She no longer mentioned things like, "It's over if someone finds out my identity as a woman." A woman's thoughts really couldn't be taken seriously. "If it really doesn't work, I can say that it's for my fiancé. Isn't this what you taught me, Governor?" Yin said, "There are so many people and so many good intentions. It's hard to refuse such great kindness." She spoke modestly, but her eyes revealed a sense of satisfaction and contentment. Xiaoju only felt that it was funny. She leaned back slightly, and a trace of a smile flashed through her eyes. She said indifferently, "It's quite popular." The horse carriage gradually disappeared into the distance. Mu Hongjin stood on the shore. Among the mountains, she could no longer see the boat of carrying souls. The former youth had returned to the mountains, lakes, and seas. She still had to continue sitting here on the high seat in the cold palace hall. This was her responsibility. "The young highness is already on the way back," the maid beside her said softly. "Your highness, let's go back to the residence." Mu Hongji nodded. She took one last look at the end of the long river and turned around. She wore a wide-sleeved robe, dignified and beautiful. There seemed to be a dot of silver light on her wrist that quickly disappeared. A wanderer came out of nowhere. He wore a bamboo hat and held a bamboo stick. He walked along the riverbank and sang. His voice drifted with the wind and gradually faded into the distance. "The Ritterni still thinks of the imperial court. How can I comfort myself today? The bitter cold thinks of your thin clothes, riding a thin horse under the waning moon. I also know that there must be differences in life, but I'm afraid that time will drift away. The cold lantern opposite to the past. When will the night rain sound bleak?" The end of the 4th volume. Chapter 162. On the way back to Liangzhou from Jiang, they were not as energetic as when they first arrived. It was probably because they had just gone through a fierce battle, so everyone was a little tired. Lin Shuanghe also returned Cui Jiao and Hong Qiao's indenture contracts to them. He also left a sum of money for their parents to tell them not to sell their children in the future. Before leaving, he even mentioned Cui Yuezhi's name because he was afraid that their parents would secretly oppose him. The two girls were reluctant to leave. After all, It was not every day that they could meet a master who was easy to serve and did not beat or scold the servants. Sometimes being the servant of such a kind-hearted madam was much easier than struggling in the difficult world. When they left the Liangzhou guard, it was not yet spring. Now that they had been delayed on the road, it was already early summer by the time they returned. Ian had already changed back into men's clothes. It was more convenient to wear men's clothes when they were hurrying on the road. Lin Shuanghe would occasionally wave his fan and sigh, "My younger sister, he is so beautiful, but she has to dress up as a man. What a waste." He entreated it as if he was talking nonsense. On the second day of the 5th month, Xiao Zhu and He Yin arrived at the Liangzhou guard. At the foot of Baiwen Mountain, the sound of soldiers training could be heard from afar. He Yin jumped off the carriage and looked in the direction of Wulu River and the martial arts practice field. He suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. In the end, she had been in the Liangzhou guard for most a year, but she seemed to have completely gotten used to life here. As soon as she arrived, she was like a tired bird returning to the forest. She felt indescribably at ease. Shen Han, who had already received the news, rushed over and helped everyone unload the goods from the carriage. When he saw that He Yin and Xiao Zhu were safe and sound, he immediately sighed in relief. A long time had passed by the time they received news about the military situation in Jiang. They also knew that it was 20,000 Jiang city soldiers against 150,000 Yudo. Just thinking about it made them feel scared. They were only worried about whether they were injured in the fierce battle. Now it seemed that they were all alive and kicking, so there was no need to worry. Commander-in-Chief must be tired from the journey. Go back to your room and rest for a while. Shen Han said, "The room has already been cleaned." Xiao Zhu nodded. While they were talking, another carriage arrived and stopped behind them. The curtain of the carriage was lifted, and Ying Xiang helped Xu Zhao out of the carriage. Shen Han was stunned. This 4th young Master Chu will stay in the Liang province guards for the time being. Xiao Zhu's voice was calm. "Find him a room." He then glanced sideways at Chu Zhao and said in a mocking tone, "The conditions in the Institute of Wei are difficult. 4th young Master Chu, please forgive us." Chu Zhao cupped his hands and thanked her. "I don't dare. Xylan is very grateful." Xiao Zhu couldn't be bothered with him. She turned around and left. He hurried to catch up. Chung Lisu was no longer in the Liang province guard. Logically speaking, Chung Lisu's room should be returned to its rightful owner. However, Xiao Zhu seemed to have forgotten about this matter. Living here, it was indeed more convenient for her to bathe and freshen up compared to living with the others. Since Xiao Zhu didn't mention it, He Yin pretended not to know. He carried the luggage back to Chung Lisu's room, which was next door to Xiao Zhu's room. Shen Han followed behind him. He held a military booklet in his hand and said, "This is the content of the daily training for the past few days. I have already organized it. You can take a look at it slowly after you have rested. When you return, the Nan Province Guards will still be trained by you. In the past few months, the Liang Province Guards formation has begun to show results." Xiao Zhu took the military booklet from his hand and flipped through it casually. Shen Han turned his head to look at the room next door. He saw Ian sitting on the bed with a bag spread out in front of him. He seemed to be organizing the things he brought back from Jiang. With a rough look, there were quite a lot of things. Food, clothes, and small trinkets spread out on the bed. He looked at Xiao Zhu again. She didn't seem to have any intention of stopping him. Shen Han fell in a deep thought. It should be known that 2nd young Master Xiao was very particular about cleanliness. Even after he left, the room had to be cleaned every day. The men in the army were fine. However, the instructors who interacted with Xiao Zhu didn't dare to act rashly in front of Xiao Zhu. At least they had the proper manners to sit and stand. They weren't as casual as He Yin. Xiao Zhu didn't stop him either. Could it be that their relationship had improved after their trip to Jiang? He was deep in thought and didn't notice Xiao Zhu calling his name. Xiao Zhu saw that he didn't respond. She looked up and followed his gaze. She saw Shen Han staring at He Yin, who was sitting on the bed and organizing his luggage. She frowned and called out to him again, "Shen Han." Shen Han shuddered and came back to his senses. He said, "Commander-in-Chief, I'm going to write a memorial. Find a few people to keep an eye on Chu's island. He said, if there's anything unusual, immediately inform me. Shenhan nodded and left. Hien waited for Shenhan to leave before he lay down on the bed and rolled around. Xiao Ju frowned unhappily. Are you a dog? After such a long journey, I've been tossing and turning in the carriage every day. Finally, I can have a good night's sleep. Hien grabbed a handful of dried fruits from the bag and placed it in his palm. Commander-in-Chief, this was given to me by Lady Chui's concubine. Do you want a handful? Xiao Ju said no. It's a token of my sincerity. You don't have to be so heartless. Hien found a clean handkerchief and wrapped the dried fruits. I'll put on your table later. Xiao Ju didn't even turn her head as she flipped through the military register that Shenhan had just sent over. Hien thought that being a general had its difficulties, but being a soldier also had its advantages. For example, right now, she could roll around on the bed, but Xiao Ju still had to deal with a backlog of official matters. Hien looked at Xiao Ju's back and suddenly thought of something. He asked Xiao Ju, Commander-in-Chief, there's something I've always wanted to ask you. Xiao Ju said, go ahead. Hien hesitated for a moment. Do you still remember when we were in Jiang City, the day the Yudo attacked the city? I set the fire with you. We should have swum all the way to the shore, but I choked on water. Were you the one who dragged me up? Actually, there was something she didn't say out loud. In her daze, she felt as though someone had passed her some air. She couldn't open her eyes underwater, but she vaguely felt that it was Xiao Ju. However, it was too unbelievable to say it out loud. Firstly, was Xiao Ju the kind of person who would pass someone's air like that? Definitely not. Secondly, she actually had such a dream. If she told others about it, they would laugh at her for thinking about such strange things in a life-and-death situation. Xiao Ju's eyes flickered. She paused and said yes. Although it was hard to say, Hien still bravely asked, Commander-in-Chief, other than dragging me up the shore, did you do anything else? Xiao Ju said no. Hien was stunned. No. He tilted his head and slowly curled the corners of his lips. He said with a half-smile, then what do you want me to do to you? Hien didn't know how to respond. She laughed and said, no, I was just asking casually. She thought to herself that she really did have a wet dream. Fortunately, she didn't say it out loud. Otherwise, it would be too embarrassing. Xiao Ju looked at the military book in front of her again. However, her eyes flickered slightly. She glanced at the girl who was sitting on the bed and arranging her luggage. After a while, she looked away uncomfortably. In the end, she didn't say anything else. After arranging her luggage in the room, Hien looked at the sky. He guessed that the training in the martial arts arena was about to end. Hien went out and walked towards the arena. From tomorrow onwards, she would resume her daily training. However, today, she could chat with her brothers who she hadn't seen in a long time. Just as she arrived at the entrance of the arena, the training ended. From afar, she heard Xiao Mai's voice. It's Ahigo. Ahigo is back. With a hula sound, all the people immediately surrounded him. Regardless of whether they knew her or not, Hien was now famous in the Liang province guard. Xiao Mai was pushed to the side. Hien pulled her to stand next to him. Xiao Mai said, Ahigo, when did you come back? Why didn't you tell us? I heard from the instructors that you and the governor won another battle in Jiang. Ahigo, you're so amazing. How did the news spread so quickly? Hien was still puzzled. Someone else said, I heard that the Jiang City Guard only had 20,000 people, while the Yuchuo soldiers had 150,000. Brother He, tell us, how exactly did you win? That's right, quickly tell the brothers. Hien felt that every time she did something and returned to the Liang province guard, she would become a storyteller, telling stories to everyone. However, she was surrounded in the center and couldn't advance or retreat. She could only sit on the railing of the arena and stretch out her hand. Everyone, quiet down, quiet down. This is a long story. Let me drink some water first. Someone immediately handed her water from a leather flask. I have some. Drink mine. Do you want to eat something else? Do you want dry biscuits? Okay, then I'll say it. Actually, this battle wasn't very difficult. It was all because of the governor's good command. Jiang is Water City. Liang Ping looked at Hien, who was surrounded by people from afar. He was speechless for a moment, then said, "This brat is so famous in the Liang province guard now? Why is it that he has hundreds of people responding to his call?" Ma Damii smiled mysteriously. "This is a good thing. What's so good about it?" Yin went to Jiang with the governor. Ma Damii stroked her beard. When they came back, they rode in the same carriage. It can be seen that they got along quite well. Since he went to Jiang with the governor, that means he fought side by side. Do you think the governor will mention him when he goes to present a memorial to the governor this time? At least he has a small share of the credit. This young man is very skilled and has a magnanimous personality. As long as he follows the governor, it's inevitable that he will be promoted. I believe that his future will definitely not be restricted to our Liang province guards. Brother, it's not a bad thing for the Liang province guard to have a good relationship with him. Ma Damii chuckled and patted his shoulder. You have to look at the long term. He's only in his teens. Liang Ping muttered, "How can you make it sound so powerful?" Ma Damii smiled, but didn't say anything. On the other side, the people who were listening to Yan's storytelling exclaimed in surprise. It's actually a fire attack. This is too dangerous. What if there's no wind? Won't we just sit there and wait for death? Yan laughed. If there's no wind, then we'll have to fight to the end. However, war is complicated to begin with. There's no absolute way for the strong to defeat the weak. As long as the timing is right, it's not difficult for the few to defeat the many. Therefore, we can't be certain of victory or defeat in every battle. On the battlefield, there are thousands of changes in an instant. Until the last moment, victory or defeat is unknown. Everyone nodded as if they understood. After listening to the commotion, the crowd gradually dispersed. The remaining people were naturally Hong Shan and the others. Wang Ba crossed her arms and looked at Yan. She couldn't stand him. You're in the limelight as soon as you come back. Even Peacock isn't as arrogant as you. Then I have to have the ability to be in the limelight. Yan jumped down from the railing. Long time no see, my friends. Perhaps it was because they had stayed in the vanguard for a while, but the day training was much more difficult than in the ordinary barracks. Sure too, Jiang Jiao, Wang Ba, and Huang Xiong all looked darker and thinner than before. However, they were more energetic than before. Jiang Jiao asked, "I didn't expect you to win such a battle in Jiang." "Ahi, you're really good." "I didn't fight." Yan declined humbly. The commander-in-chief commanded well. "How is it? You've made a contribution this time. Can you be promoted?" Huang Xiong had been very practical. "I don't know if I'll be promoted or not, but the commander-in-chief has promised to let me join the Southern Prefecture Army." Yan said, "I'm already very satisfied with this." "Really?" Hong Shan was so excited that his tone changed. "Ahi, you've gotten what you wanted." Everyone congratulated him one after another. Only Sure Tu remained calm. He only asked Yan, "Brother why did Yudo suddenly attack Jiang? Did they come to Liangzhou before?" Yan's smile gradually faded, and his expression became serious. After a while, he said, "Dewey might be going to war. Since Yudo had started it, they would not give up so easily. They had laid low for so many years just for this moment." For a moment, everyone fell silent. War, for the common people of the Great Way, for every single person, was not something worth being happy about. The room was dimly lit. The young man in front of the table was still reading the long scroll in his hand. Piles of military books were stacked together. There were so many things to do in the Liangzhou guards that it was impossible to finish them all. Someone knocked on the door softly. Xiao Ju did not even raise her head. She only said, "Come in." Shen Muxue came in. She carried a basket of food in her hand and carefully walked in. She placed the food basket on a small table and said softly, "Commander-in-Chief, you've been reading for a long time. Eat something." Xiao Ju responded, but she did not intend to get up. Shen Muxue sighed softly. When Xiao Ju came back, she was still staying up late in the medical center. The soldiers of the Liangzhou guards caught cold and heat easily during the changing seasons between spring and summer. Halfway through brewing medicine, she heard that Xiao Ju had returned. She really wanted to go and see her, but she had to give up on the idea because she had not finished her work. In addition, they were returning to Liangzhou from Jiang, which was a long journey. She thought that Xiaoju needed more rest. However, she did not expect him to still be reading documents so late at night. However, Xiaoju had always been like this. When she first met him, he was still like this. He had never changed. There are local products from Jiang on the ground. Take some back. Xiaoju looked at the documents and said, "There's no more space in the room." Shen Muxiwa nodded. She put down the food basket and went to tidy up the bundles on the ground. There were indeed a lot of bundles and wooden boxes. When she opened them, she saw that they were some fabrics, cakes, and dried fruits that were produced in Jiang. The Liangzhou guards did not have such things. Some of the food could be added to their daily meals, and the soldiers would be very happy. The box at the top looked very exquisite. It was a round wooden box with a layer of paint on it. When she looked carefully, she saw that it was carved with a scene from the Water God Festival in Jiang. When she opened it, she saw that it was filled with ointment. When she put it under her nose, she could smell a faint floral fragrance. This thing was not particularly expensive, but it was exquisite and cute. Most girls liked it. The ointment boxes made in Liangzhou were not as special as the ones made in Jiang. The ointment inside was used to wipe the hands. Soaking in water or making medicinal herbs all day long would cause the skin to occasionally crack. Although Shan Mushiwell loved her skin very much and had prepared a lot of ointment, she was still very happy to see this. She picked up the box and placed it in her palm. She looked at Xiaoju and was a little shy. She hesitated for a moment before she said softly, "Thank you, Commander-in-Chief. I really like this ointment." When Xiaoju heard this, she did not seem to understand what she was talking about. She turned her head and looked at the box in her hand. She paused for a moment before she said calmly, "This is not for you." Shen Mushiwe's face instantly turned red. She quickly put the box down and said in a fluster, "I'm sorry, Commander-in-Chief. I thought it was for me." Although Xiaoju did not say anything, she felt very embarrassed. It was as if she was overthinking things. "Take the other things, but don't touch the box." After Xiaoju said this, she did not look at her anymore. Shen Mushiwa bit her lip and quickly tidied up the other bundles on the ground. Then, she carried them out of the door. When she walked out of the door, her gaze lingered on the box on the table for a moment. The soldiers of the Liang province guards never cared about whether their skin was chapped or not. They also had to do a lot of training every day, so they would not go out of their way to find ointment that could moisturize their hands and feet. Even if they were very particular about it, they would not use such a beautiful box that was obviously meant for women. Xiaoju would not use it either. Furthermore, when he said, "This is not for you," he meant that he was giving it to someone else. Who was he giving it to? A cool breeze blew at night. After seeing the liveliness of Jiang City, she was still not used to the desolation of the Liang province guards. There were no rivers or boats that passed through the city. There was only the silent Baiwa Mountain and the vast Wulu River, as well as the empty martial arts practice field at night. Tian walked alone. She met her good friends in the Liang province guards and distributed the local products she brought back from Jiang to them in Hongshan. She chatted with them until late at night before she turned around and walked back into the house. She planned to ask Xiaoju when she went back. From tomorrow onwards, she would be able to train with the Nan province guards. Who knew that on the way, he would meet Chu Zhao? Chu Zhao did not have Xiang by his side. He walked alone. When he saw Hien, he smiled and greeted him. "Hey, Brother Chu." Hien looked around him to make sure he did not see anyone else. He asked curiously, "It's so late. Brother Chu, are you out for a walk alone?" Even if he was out for a walk, there were no trees or flowers around. It was too pitiful to walk alone. Chu Zhao was stunned. He smiled and shook his head. "No, I'm just looking for someone to help me." "What kind of help?" Chu Zhao opened his palm. There was a shirt, too, lying in his palm. This shirt, too, seemed to have been picked up from the Wulu River. It was strangely interesting. It was flat and looked like the shape of a white horse, but there was a circle of black edges around its tail. For some reason, there was an extra piece. "Hey, do you think this shirt, too, looks like a horse?" Chu Zhao smiled, but from here, he pointed at the end, "There's an extra piece. I want to find someone to help me chop this shirt, too, off. However, it's late at night, and everyone seems to be asleep. So he was looking for someone to work with. Ian looked at Chu Zhao. He thought that this person was so thin that he could be blown away by a gust of wind. He definitely would not be able to chop this Shirtu off. It was just a matter of convenience. So he asked Chu Zhao, "Does Brother Chu have a saber?" Chu Zhao took out a dagger from his chest. This dagger looked very thin. The handle was shaped like a bamboo leaf. Ian picked it up and was speechless for a moment. Scholars were really fastidious. However, this dagger was made like this. It was more decorative than useful. It was more suitable for cutting fruits. If it was really used for self-defense, it would make people laugh their heads off. Ian disdainfully weighed it in his hand. Then he said, "Give me the Shirtu." Chu Zhao handed the Shirtu to him. Ian put the Shirtu on the ground. He pressed down on the horse's head with one hand and chopped down with a knife with the other. With a crisp sound, the extra piece of the horse's tail was cut off. At the same time, the tip of the dagger was also missing a piece. Ian, he has good skills. Chu Zhao did not care about this point. He said happily, "I'll polish it a bit more. It will look very complete." Ian could not understand Chu Zhao's behavior at all. Craftsmen did this kind of work for no other reason than to make a living. Chu Zhao seemed to really like it. He heard that there were princes, dukes, and ministers who loved to farm in their manors. He probably felt the same way. However, Ian would never do something like carving a piece of Shirtu in the middle of the night instead of sleeping. After all, he was a rough person who did not have any refined interests. Chu Zhao put the dagger back. He held the piece of Shirtu in his hand and looked at Ian with a smile. "Speaking of which, I always trouble you to do this kind of thing for me, but I can't do anything for you. I'm really ashamed. It's just a small matter. Brother Chu, you don't have to take it to heart. Throwing stone dumbbells is also a physical activity. It didn't take much effort to help you chop a piece of Shirtu." Ian shrugged. "Other than that, I haven't helped you much." Chu Zhao lowered his head and smiled. "Didn't he also give me his clothes when we were in Jiang?" At this point, he seemed to blush and said in a low voice, "Although I didn't use them, but thank you very much." Ian said, "That's what I should do." After all, she was busy with other things when such a weak person was in front of her. It was normal for her to help him. If it was someone else other than Chu Zhao, she would have done the same. "Brother Chu, what do you plan to do in the future?" Ian asked. "Do you plan to continue living in the Liang Province Guard?" Chu Zhao's identity was strange to begin with. It did not seem to be beneficial for him to continue living in the Liang Province Guard. Ian could not understand this either. He looked at Xiao Zhu coldly and did not seem to have any intention of interfering. "No." Chu Zhao shook his head. "When the matter in Jiang is settled, I will return to the capital." "Hasn't the matter in Jiang been settled? What is Brother Chu referring to?" Chu Zhao looked at Ian. In the night, he smiled slightly. His smile was as gentle as before, but there was a deeper meaning behind it that he will understand in the future. Chapter 163. After helping Chu Zhao chop Shirtu, Ian went back to her room. She didn't close the door when she left, so it was wide open. She could see Xiao Zhu's room. Xiao Zhu was sitting in front of the table. He wasn't reading the military pamphlet anymore. Under the light, his eyes were closed, and he was rubbing his forehead. Ian thought to herself, "Poor thing. He hasn't even rested since he came back." She walked to Xiao Zhu's side and bent down to look at Xiao Zhu. The dim light fell on his face, making his handsome face look even more hazy. His eyelashes were thick and long, like tiny fans. She couldn't help but want to reach out and touch them. Just as her fingertips were about to touch his eyelashes, someone said, "What are you doing?" Ian suddenly withdrew her hand. He had already opened his eyes, and his cold gaze swept past her face. "Nothing." Ian stood up straight, as if nothing had happened. "There's a bug on your face. I helped you get rid of it." Xiao Zhu couldn't be bothered with her. "It's already so late," Ian said. "Commander-in-Chief, you should sleep. You've been reading the military pamphlet for half a day. Aren't you going to rest?" Xiao Zhu rubbed her wrists. She looked a little tired. When they were in Jiang, they lived in the same room. There wasn't even a central door to shelter them. But at that time, They didn't have much to do except for the last few days. Every day, they just turned off the lights and went to bed early. Once they returned to Jiang, there were many things to do. "I'll sleep after I finish reading," he said. "Am I going to train with the Nanfu army tomorrow?" He asked. "Do I need to tell Yang Jiaodo?" Xiaoju. "No, I've already told Liang Ping." He nodded. "You don't seem to be worried." He raised his eyebrows. "Why should I be worried? The Nanfu Army's daily training is much more than the Liang Province Guard's daily training." "I already knew that." He sighed and said, "People always strive for greater heights." Of course, of course. She was not worried about things like training. It was nothing more than suffering. Suffering in the South Prefecture Army was much better than suffering in the Liang Province Guard. At least he had a better future. As she spoke, she caught a glimpse of a food basket on the small table beside her. The small table was previously filled with Chui Yueji's local produce, but it should have been cleaned up by someone at this moment. The food basket was particularly conspicuous. Ian asked, "Commander-in-Chief, have you not eaten?" "What is it?" "You can't not eat." Ian helped him open the food basket. The food inside was extremely sumptuous, with meat, vegetables, and snacks. Ian let out a ha sound and sighed in admiration. Are the dishes of the Liang Province Guard this good now? However, after a moment, he refuted himself. That's not right. This should be your personal meal, right? It's good to be a commander-in-chief. Even the food you eat is so exquisite. Of all the generals in Wei, you eat the best. Xiao Ju was speechless. You seen it before? Ian thought to himself that she had indeed seen it before. When she was a General Fei Hong, the food she ate was not even half of what Xiao Ju ate. It was good enough to have meat, let alone snacks. Perhaps this was because Xiao Ju was the second son of the Xiao family, and she was from an ordinary family when she joined the army. Generals were divided into different ranks. However, the Liang Province Guard chef was really good at cooking. The flowers carved on the snacks were really beautiful. Ian called out to him, "Commander-in-Chief, come and eat. The food is getting cold." Xiao Ju glanced at her. Seeing that this person was so enthusiastic, he seemed to be the owner of an inn. He thought it was funny, but after a moment, his expression returned to normal. He walked to the table and sat down. In Jiang, the two of them often ate at the same table. It had long become a habit. Ian subconsciously gave him a pair of chopsticks and took a pair for herself. In fact, she had already eaten that night. It was the familiar biscuit of the Liang Province Guard. She had a big appetite, and at this moment, she had forgotten that she was not in Jiang and was not Wen Yuyan. She happily reached out and picked up a piece of sugar cake. After picking it up, Ian came to her senses and looked up at the person sitting opposite her. The young man looked at her calmly and raised his eyebrows slightly. "I'll just eat a little," Ian said. "Commander-in-Chief won't be so stingy, right?" She was becoming more and more daring in front of Xiao Ju. When she had just entered the Liang Province Guards, even if you beat Ian to death, he would never have thought that there would be a day when she would act so wantonly in front of Xiao Ju. "Don't talk while eating," the second son of the Xiao family said coldly. Ian stuffed the sweet biscuit in her mouth. She looked at the elegant way the person opposite her ate and mumbled, "Commander-in-Chief, this beard is so hot." "What are you talking about?" Ian swallowed the food in his mouth. "I'm saying this chef is so nice. He made all the dishes that Commander-in-Chief likes to eat. Of course, I like to eat them too." Xiao Ju's lips twitched. "What do you like to eat?" Ian was used to teasing others, but he had long since stopped taking it to heart. At this moment, she accidentally saw a palm-sized wooden box on the table. She picked it up and was stunned when she saw the picture of Jiang City's Water God Festival engraved on the wooden box. "Is this a gift from Master Chui?" Xiao Ju replied, "Yes." Ian opened it and saw that it seemed to be ointment for wiping hands. He leaned closer and sniffed it. There was a faint floral fragrance. As he spoke, Ian jumped onto the railing next to the martial arts practice field. She liked to sit on it and swing her legs like a swing. However, as soon as she jumped onto it, something rolled out from her bosom. It landed next to Shirtu's feet. Shirtu bent down and picked up the thing on the ground. Xiaomai asked, "What's this? Can it be eaten?" "It looks like a hand ointment." Huang Xiong asked, "I've seen my little sister use it before." "What's the picture on it?" "It's a picture of the Water God Festival in Jiang City," Yin said. "That's all." "What's wrong with you?" Wang Ba looked away in disgust. "Hand ointment? Isn't that stuff for women? You're a man. How can you use this stuff? Isn't it disgusting?" Yin, "Why can't men use hand ointment? I'm being particular. You bandits obviously don't understand these things. Why do you have to look down on us bandits?" Wang Ba was furious. "We bandits are also divided into different ranks." Seeing that they were about to quarrel again, Zhang Jiao hurriedly stepped forward to persuade them. "All right, stop quarreling. However, brother we practice martial arts every day. If you use this, it won't be of much use, right?" He was afraid that she would just moisten her hands a little today and cut them open tomorrow. The speed at which she moistened her hands was not as fast as the speed at which she cut them open. After all, who didn't have scars on their hands during their daily training at the martial art practice field? Thinking about how she applied ointment that emitted a faint fragrance on her hand a moment ago, and then threw a huge stone lock up and down in the next, the onlookers probably thought that she was crazy. Yin vaguely said, "It's just a token of appreciation from the people of Jiang. Don't waste it." As he spoke, he reached out to take the box of ointment from Tu. His hand was halfway out when a gentle female voice rang out. "What's this?" Everyone turned to look and saw that it was Shen Muxue. In the darkness of the night, she held a lantern in one hand and a basket full of medicinal herbs in the other. Her white clothes were elegant and beautiful, and she looked like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. Her gaze fell on the box in Tu's hand. She hesitated. "This is hand ointment." "That's right," Hong Shan said. "Can I take a look at it?" Naturally, no one refused the beautiful female doctor's request. Shen Muxue took the box in front of her eyes. When she saw the pattern of the water god drawn on the box, her eyes flashed. After a moment, she raised her head and looked at everyone. "Whose hand ointment is this?" "Mine," Yin said. Shen Muxue looked at her. At this time, the night was about to end, and the martial arts practice field was only illuminated by dim torches. The young man sat on the railing with a lazy smile on his face. Why was there only one female doctor in the Liang Province Guard? Shen Muxue. She had heard Shen Han call Shen Muxue Miss Shen. Those military instructors were not only grateful to Shen Muxue, but also respected her. So it was because of this. Imperial Censor, Shen's daughter, General Zhao's son. Their family backgrounds were similar, their appearances were similar, and even their fathers were good friends. He turned over and faced the wall. He thought bitterly that they really were a good match. The next day, it was day training again. With the experience of the first day, he was much more familiar on the second day. The day training in the Nanfu army didn't have a two-person unit. Since there were no battles, it was peaceful. In addition, the Nanfu army mostly trained in troop formations. Ian was already familiar with troop formations. He could keep up with the changes in troop formations and never be a burden. This made Tian Lang feel a little surprised. "How is it?" Shen Han looked at He Yin in the troop formation and asked Tian Lang, "Is this kid okay?" Although He Yin was now a member of the Nanfu army, he was still a member of the Liang Province Guard. Shen Han was very concerned about him. Moreover, this kid had a close relationship with Xiao Ju. Shen Han thought that he should always pay attention to He Yin. Tian Lang said, "His aptitude isn't bad." Shen Han was amused. When He Yin had just arrived at the Liang Province Guard, Xiao Ju had personally judged him to be lacking in aptitude. At that time, none of the military instructors thought highly of He Yin. They thought that He Yin would be forced to be a vanguard soldier sooner or later. They didn't expect that He Yin would go the furthest now. As expected, no one could say for sure what happened on the battlefield. The other military instructors also came over. Currently, the recruits of the Liang Province Guard were resting. The Nanfu army didn't have much time to rest, so they came over to see how He Yin was adapting. He didn't embarrass the Liang province guard. Liang Ping was very proud. He even pretended to be modest as he said, "Deputy Chief Tian, please teach this kid more in the future. Don't worry about our reputation. Teach him a lesson when you need to." Tian Lang was speechless. Ma Damei smiled and said, "Deputy Chief Tian, this young man learns very quickly. It's not that the Liang province guard is boasting. If you teach him more, he'll definitely surprise you often in the future." Tian Lang was speechless. To him, Yin was just a recruit with decent aptitude who happened to be trusted by Xiao Ju. However, in terms of skill, there were too many outstanding people in the Nanfu army. There was no need to mention the Nine Flags Battalion. It was just that the Liang Province Guard was located in a remote area. It wasn't easy for them to find someone like this. They worshipped him like a bodhisattva. Their foresight was still limited.